Well, that's because the glass actually, due to refraction, creates a horizontal crease. And sometimes it's visible at higher latitudes.
Okay, what I want to talk about is superior mirages. Sometimes you'll see a double, like a sunset or a sunrise or a sunset when the sun is going down, and then it has this crease in the sky. So like a reflective crease. Actually, it's a refractive crease created by the glass sky. Now, scientists will tell you that is due, that's called a superior mirage, and they'll say it's due to the air that's closer to the ground being colder than the air above, and that makes no sense whatsoever. See, they have to conjure up some kind of explanation because they don't profess to believe that there's actually a glass ceiling to the sky, which creates this. Let me show you what they say. Their explanation: a superior mirage occurs when an image of an object appears above the actual object due to the refraction, well, that's true, or bending of light waves from the object down toward the eye of the observer. Downward refraction occurs because air closer to the ground is colder and therefore more dense than air higher up. Well, that's all backwards. I mean, that's not the way it goes. I mean, if you understand anything about the temperature of the atmosphere, it gets colder when it goes higher, not lower to the ground. The sea level, the temperature is consistently decreasing as you get higher. So it makes no sense. So at the higher latitude regions, the polar regions, you can sometimes see this crease in the sky, and that's created because there's a glass sky. That's the only reason. That's the only reason why you see double suns in the sky sometimes. Or sometimes you'll see with the sun rising at one end of the horizon, and the actual opposite end you'll see that sun rise as well, because it's actually creating this refraction or this reflection, or both, toward the opposite end of the inside of the Earth. We're living on the concave surface of the Earth. So I made these animations in Lightwave 3D, and the one on the left is with refraction, basically, and the one on the right is without refraction. You can see basically there is an invisible sphere, a glass sphere that's covering these two objects, the bigger circle and the smaller circle, and that is, when I turn the refraction on, this is what you see on the left. You see the smaller white circle. Actually, it's not a circle, it's a ball, it's a sphere. It retains the same height as it goes across. So when you see the sun rise and sunset, it's going to retain the same size. However, it is squishing vertically, but that's due to the refraction. Now you also see, look there too, you see that crease right there? That's the crease. That's created by the glass sky. That is why we have superior mirages. It's not due to the lower air being colder than the higher air. That makes no sense whatsoever. So that's why you get that that crease in the sky, that double sun crease, sometimes at sunset or sunrise. I made a graphic about this crease. Let me pull that up. I called it the horizontal crease. And what I was telling you is that like this red line would be the actual crease, and it's usually lower than what we see at the horizon. However, at higher latitudes, sometimes we see that crease. And it also, the glass also gives us the illusion that it's actually, the sky is actually a dome, when it's actually the other way around. So there's just another piece of evidence. There's so much evidence that there's a glass sky. It's just another one.
Number 17. Meteor showers, iridium flares. That's all it is, guys. It's the cyclical skidding of inner space debris, particles skidding, creating streaks. There's also a term called triboluminescence. When you rub quartz together, or you rub a rock against quartz, it will light up. So when you see shooting stars, meteor showers, it's because they're skidding across the glass sky. That's all it is, guys.
take out light. Then I start to rub one of the quartz cobbles toward the other. And you can see light. This is not sparks, it's triboluminescence.
Triboluminescence is the emission of light when something is ground, fractured, or otherwise smashed. This triphenylphosphine bispyridine thiocyanate copper
Number 18. Redshift. You've probably heard that you've been told that the universe is expanding because they see the redshift of the stars. Well, nothing can be further from the truth. What they don't understand is that there's actually two layers of glass, one at the 100-kilometer level and the other at the celestial sphere level. So you're viewing the stars through two layers of glass, and it's creating chromatic aberration. It's creating the colors. It's creating the shifting. That's all it is. It does not indicate movement away from you. They say it's like the Doppler effect. There's nothing further from the truth. All stellar spectroscopy is debunked due to scientists ignoring chromatic aberration of stars caused by glass. Number 19, aberration of light, stellar aberration. Sometimes astronomers will see slight movement in this, like a displacement in the sky, in the stars, and that's only because the glass sky, it creates a slight apparent displacement of stars due to the refraction. 21, Crookes dark space. There's a man named Crook in the 1800s who found negative charged ions create dark space around glass tubes. It's the same thing with our glass sky. Where is the way where light dwells? And as for darkness, where is the place thereof? Job 38:19. Job 38:19. Glass sky. There's actually an area surrounding the glass sky at 100 kilometers that is immersed in darkness. There's a term called Crookes darkness, or Crookes dark space, with cold cathode tubes, where it actually creates this area of darkness around the inside of a cathode tube.
Glass acts like a vacuum tube, like a vacuum chamber, like a plasma ball that contains plasma, in which solar radiation is hitting the geomagnetic radiation of the Earth. I think the Earth has a metal rind to it. I think that this metal rind is slightly tilted. I believe that the continental and the oceanic plates were formed over the metal rind, over the water. I believe there's a layer of water that's sandwiched in here. And the scripture says in Job 26 that I stretched the north over the empty place. I also believe that it was stretched over the south as well, where this area is just plate. There's no metal there. So the continental plates, the sedimentary rock was created by the water. And so it's stretched over. I don't believe there's really any, I mean, there might be some little pinholes here and there in the north and the south, but I believe it's been covered over like that with water. Now if I grab the little lip here, the metal lip, you can see the auroral zone. Okay. It's also tilted, right? the magnetic North Pole, the magnetic South Pole, or the geomagnetic North Pole and South Pole, they're tilted. So they're not going to be exactly in line with the true north, the true geographic north, or the geographic south. They're going to be slightly, it's about 10 to 11 degrees. So it's tilted like that. It's also interesting that the poles are flat, right? Well, that would make sense. If it was stretched over with sedimentary rock that created the plates, there's no metal there, so, I mean, the poles of the Earth are flat, right? So this auroral zone, okay, it's just mimicking the opening of the metal rind. This is my theory. And this magnetism of the metal Earth, the metal rind of the Earth, it's coming out from the north, it's going around the outside of the Earth, and it's coming right back up, shooting back up north like that. There's declination within the Earth, magnetic declination. That's like these vertical, semi-vertical lines going throughout the Earth that are caused by a deviation of the vertical magnetic flux. So the continents, you know, there's stuff in the continents, whether it's metal or whether it's changing the direction slightly of the magnetic deviation, which wants to go perfectly vertical. So the sunlight within the Earth, here's the sun's rays. During the auroras, the end of the sun's rays, the auroras happen like in the cold, in the wintertime, or getting close to the wintertime. So let me just tilt that sun a little bit. The end of the rays are going to interfere with the auroral zone, the magnetic activity coming up from the lips, from the metal lips of the rind of the Earth. Okay, it's not the magnetosphere, the glass sky. It's causing the vacuum, creating the plasma, creating the nitrogen and the oxygen. There's still a little bit, it's not a complete vacuum, so there's still some nitrogen and oxygen above the glass, which is creating the striations, this interference, the solar wind, the end of the curved rays of the sun, interacting with the magnetic flux of the lips of the metallic rind of the Earth. That's how I believe. So this metal, it's shifting, it's moving, it's the waters that's sandwiched between, or the oil that's sandwiched between, is shifting. So you have the inside of the Earth, heaven, it's staying perfectly vertical. Okay, it's not shifting whatsoever, but this outer metal rind is, over the years, okay, the magnetic North Pole is moving every once in a while. So that's what I believe is happening. That's how I believe the auroras are happening. Auroras happen in this state, within a vacuum, with glass. Glass acts as the insulation, the insulator. So it blocks all this, all these rays, the solar radiation, and it creates the striations like that. I don't want to tell you differently. Talk to you later.
I believe that the magnetic current or field lines are wrapping around the outer edge, going in and out from the north and south. I believe there's actually openings in the north and south of the rind. Okay, I believe those openings are covered over with continental plates. I believe that's also why the poles of the Earth are flattened, because they don't have that outer metal covering. And these openings are offset. The rind is offset slightly. If you'll notice the auroral zone, it's like 10 degrees offset. It's not perfectly aligned with the geographic north and south poles. And I believe that this rind is precessing, slowly shifting, because I believe that there's like layers within the Earth, whether they be water or oil, that's actually lubricating the outer rind to press us back and forth. I believe that's also why the magnetic north and south poles shift, because of this precessing effect. The magnetic north poles are not precisely in unison with the shift. I believe that's because of the different perturbations that are happening within the Earth, but for the most part, I believe that this is like a rocking back and forth mechanism.
Seismic waves within the inverted hollow Earth. Now there's a version by a man named Jan, whatever his name is, Lamprecht, where he gives he gives his own version of the hollow Earth, how the seismic waves move. Actually, initially they proposed this model. Okay, you're looking at the Earth, you're standing on the Earth, which is convex, which they have it. It's not really convex. But anyway, there's a shadow zone at 105 degrees and 140 degrees that virtually no seismic activity occurs there. However, there is still a little bit of activity that occurs there. Like if you look in this diagram of the solid convex Earth, they have 105 to 140 degrees where there's no seismic activity. You got the black lines and the red lines. The black lines are the P waves. The red lines are the S waves. The S waves are secondary. Black lines are primary. Secondary waves don't travel through liquids or gases. They only travel through solids. There's a version of, okay, you got the P waves and the S waves. Problem is, okay, basically going back a little bit, there's a man named Moho Rivicic, seismic discontinuity. Basically, in Croatia, early 1900s, he talked about 35 kilometers below, there was a rapid acceleration in velocity at that level when there was an earthquake here in Croatia, basically. So he concluded that the material has to be denser. It has to be denser than basalt rock, basically, because basalt rock, granite rock, has densities of 2.6 to 3.0. Okay, so metals have a higher density. So basically, seismic activity, seismic waves can travel faster through metals, especially obviously fastest through platinum or gold. So going back here, I wanted to talk about a little bit about this discontinuity. They call it the moho, or the mantle. Now he's saying there's actually a line that separates the crust from the mantle, but I'm saying the moho, if you want to call it that, is the actual mantle. Okay, this is my version. The inverted hollow Earth, okay? Okay, right here, I'm going to zoom in over there. Right there is the epicenter. Let's say the epicenter of an earthquake happens right there, okay? This is the continental, the granite plate. This is the basalt, the oceanic plate. I'm saying beneath that is the moho, the mantle. That's made out of metal. And then there's another layer of water. This is just speculation, but I believe that this is kind of what I've concluded, basically. And then there's also a metal rind, and there's possibly even more layers of metal beneath that. Okay, you have the epicenter of the earthquake, and the red line would be the secondary wave. The yellow line would be the primary wave. I'm saying that if there's an occurrence here, it's going to generate, in both directions actually, I just have it going in one direction, but it's going to generate this seismic wave. The S waves and the P waves are going to be going through this solid metal very fast, very quickly. Okay, this is at the 105 degree shadow zone cutoff. So the red line abruptly stops because it's entering the liquid. Okay, there's a liquid here. This is what I'm saying. I'm not sure, I'm just speculating. And the P wave continues on into the liquid, but it's too weak to reach the surface. So you still get some seismic data within this shadow zone, but you don't get that much, basically. That's what I interpret. That's what they tell me, basically. So anyway, what's going on here, I believe, is that the P wave is continuing on into this liquid, and then it's beginning to reflect back, curve around back. So basically, at the surface here, okay, here's the ocean, here's the land. When you're detecting seismic activity below, obviously the signal is getting weaker because it's getting further down, but you're still detecting it. Okay, once it enters, once it exits the mantle, the moho, and enters the liquid state, you can barely hear any seismic activity whatsoever in the shadow zone. Especially, you cannot hear any S waves. But the P waves continue on, and the P waves reverse back, and then they hit the other side of the Earth. So that is actually a biblical model too as well, because if you look at Psalm 12, the words of the Lord are pure words, as silver tried in a furnace of earth, purified 7 times. Silver and earth and 7 times. It's very interesting because Cyrus Teed, now a lot of people think he's a whack job, but actually he was a very intelligent man. And looking back in retrospect, I think he was a little bit too, I don't know, he's just a little bit too static, too rigid in some of his terminology, but he had it right. he said, okay, the universe is an agar shell obtaining as a structure perpetually recreative and existent. It is limited by the environment of its shell circumferentially and by the astral nucleus centrally. Now, number 3, its circumference has 7 metallic layers of superimposed strata. Okay, 5 mineral strata. Okay, so he's basing this, I'm not sure if he's having divine revelation. He said he did actually, but I tend to believe, yeah, the Earth has a metal rind to it. Earth also rings like a bell. Okay, so basically you have this metal rind. If I can even add the other layers too. If it does have these other layers here, basically you have these layers and they're sandwiched between. I think Cyrus T actually said there was like a mercurial solution in between them, but you know, this is speculation. But this works. This works much better than the solid Earth hypothesis, as well as the convex hollow Earth hypothesis. Jan Lamprecht basically saying that initially, okay, this is your initial version of the seismic activity on a convex planet that happens to be hollow in theory, basically. But they only have the S&P waves going to about 80 degrees, and so this is where they would need to go. And so they have to revise their model to create this much smaller interior, this much smaller hollow interior. And they have to say, well, okay, then the S waves are gradually speeding up as you get deeper and deeper, as the material becomes more denser. And then it transitions, and then it starts to shift and become less dense, so it slows down. Now, this is all conjecture and theory. And it's just a ridiculous model, because if you understand anything about information being suppressed and true nature, I mean, watch my other videos. This is the true nature. We are living inside the concave edge of the Earth, which is stationary. Cyrus T performed a rectilinear experiment in 1897, and there's also the Tamarack-Plumbbob mineshaft experiments, which showed that the plumbobs actually diverged at the bottom of the mineshaft. So basically, one thing that Lampert does right is that he does attest that the shadow zone is not completely void of seismic activity, as a solid Earth would lead you to believe. And another thing about the solid Earth is they have to figure out why the P waves are reaching the other side of the Earth a lot later than they should. And so basically they're saying that that's why they create this, I guess you would call that the outer core. But they're saying that there's higher elasticity there. It's not necessarily lower density. It's just all theory and conjecture and bullshit. Okay? Just understand that there is a metal outer edge to the Earth. There's at least one metal outer edge to the Earth. The Bible confirms that, Cyrus T confirms that, and seismic activity confirms it. Okay, these seismic waves are moving very fast through this medium, especially when it hits the so-called MOHO layer, the mantle, 35 to 50 kilometers. So that's the true nature of the universe. We are living inside it. So,
April 21st of 2013, I talked about seismic waves, actually confirming a highly dense metal encased hollow rind to the concave Earth, and possibly concentric layers as well, with water or oil sandwiched in between. And so this whole thing is pressurized. It's one big pressurized container. That's what Earth is. And so this is what would be happening. You would be getting higher pressure and higher temperature the further down you went. And so there's a cutaway of the concave Earth. And as you can see here, the bottom of the oceanic or the continental plates is going to get extremely hot. And because of the high pressure, because of the high temperature, that magma is melting and it's butting up against the highly dense layer, and it has nowhere else to go, so it creates these fissures in the actual plates, and it seeks less pressure. And since less pressure is only found in higher elevations, it finds the highest elevation possible, which would be the top of mountains. And eventually it builds up to a point where it cannot contain it anymore, and it explodes, and that's how we get the volcano. Also to do with pressure, heat, and the metal rind of the Earth blocking the molten magma from actually going any further.
The glass sky is actually going higher and lower throughout the day. I even mentioned this before, that there have been found traces of metal in the glass sky, magnetite or iron. So the glass sky is slightly magnetic. And so as the moon orbits around, because I believe the moon as well is metal, so the moon is actually pulling the glass sky closer to itself as it moves around the inside of the Earth throughout the day. Not only that, on the moon side of the glass sky, but on the opposite side, I believe there's a stress reaction that's happening as well. So we have this pinching. So this glass sky looking top down is more like an oval. So there's your only ellipse within the concave Earth. So this glass sky is moving around throughout the day. I believe the sun also is magnetic, but it doesn't have as much effect on the glass because it's further away. And so the sun will affect the tides as well, but predominantly it's the moon. And so this just throws... See, gravity is a fictitious force, people. Listen to Tesla, okay? Tesla scorned the advocates of gravity. He scorned Einstein and all that theoretical bullshit of relativity. It has nothing to do with it. It's universal compression. You are being pushed to the ground, not pulled by this fictitious force of gravity. This concept of gravity has no role in everyday matters. They haven't been to outer space. They can't test whether or not there's a force called gravity. They just assume based on what? Tides? Well, I just explained to you why tides work. It has nothing to do with gravity. What else? The orbits of the planets? No, that's not because of gravity. I explained to you. I show you why the orbits of the planets work. It has to do with magnetism. It has to do with the temperature. When the planets get closer to the sun, they speed up. It has nothing at all to do with this fictitious force of gravity. See, they have to have this concept. It's this ad hoc concept. Oh, well, since the Earth is spinning and we're being held down to the Earth on this convex Earth, we have to make up this force. Something has to be. It's just like just making up flying pink unicorns. It's the same fucking concept. It's fictitious. Okay, so on the other hand, gravity is the dominant force at the macroscopic scale. This is the cause of the formation, shape, and trajectory of astronomical bodies, including those of asteroids, comets, and planets. See, it's all bullshit, guys. It's all bullshit when they'll try to shame you with their ad populum bullshit. It's really funny. It's ironic too. I mean, just imagine if we were the majority. Just imagine this minority group of people, these fucking crackpots, thinking that the Earth is spinning. We're being held down to this magical force called gravity. They'd be laughed to fucking shame. So look at this. There's been metal to be found in the glass sky. Magnetite, iron. It's slightly magnetic, so it's being pulled up. The moon is attracting the glass sky toward it. And so just remember, there was a literal flood, and after the flood, the glass sky formed, and the glass sky performed the function of pushing or keeping the water down. So when Noah saw the rainbow in the sky, it was a promise that the earth would not be flooded again. Why? Because the rainbow is indicative of a glass sky, and the glass sky pushes. It's an ether push. It's not this pull. Universal compression. Listen to Tesla, okay? Pushes you down. So the glass sky, when it's closer to the ground, the water level is lower. It's very simple. When it's higher to the ground, the water level heightens. It's right there.
Okay. You've heard that there's an equatorial bulge to this Earth that we're, quote, living on, and that it's spinning, and that's why it's causing an equatorial bulge, and even though it doesn't make sense, because if it was spinning like that, you'd have this force in the middle, this gravitational force pulling you to the edge, and why would it be spinning? Why would it be bulging out on the side? It doesn't make sense, okay? It's duplicitous to even say, well, we're being held to the ground by the center of this mass that we call Earth, and yet there's an equatorial bulge, and yet water is sticking to it. let me just show you what I just animated. You're gonna like bing bing light bulbs go off here. All right, let me pull this up here. What you got to realize, okay? You're in a container, okay? Or let's say you have a container, a hollow container, and you put a heat source in there. And that heat source is orbiting around the equatorial region of that container. Let's say it's a spherical container. Okay, so let's say it's metal. I talked about the Earth having metal rinds to it. Even if it's not metal, heat is still going to expand objects, especially containers. Thermal expansion, okay? So if the sun is orbiting around this container at 23 north to 23 south, it stays in the tropic zones, okay? That tropic zone is going to get more heat and it's going to expand. Hallelujah. I'll show you right now. Okay, here's my animation here. I got the little moon and a little sun here. There's orbiting around the tropic regions. The moon is going from -28 to +28, which would constitute a lunar standstill, a major lunar standstill. And don't pay attention to the actual rotation velocities, or this is just for visualization, but you notice here how the equator bulges out like that because of thermal expansion, ladies and gentlemen. Thermal expansion due to the sun's heat. Obviously, it's warmer at the equator. This is also proof that the Earth is hollow. It has a thin shell. What else does it prove? Well, you know, remember when Neil deGrasse said the Earth was pear-shaped? Remember that? This proves that too. I'll show you if you watched a previous video of mine. Pour that one out. Right over here. The equation of time, the analemma within LSC concave Earth. You notice from the side view, I have this time-lapsed animation where in the southern hemisphere, the sun is closer to the Earth. Now, the southern hemisphere is not necessarily warmer because there's more water in the southern hemisphere, but if the sun is closer, it's going to create more thermal expansion. They say that it's a little bit chubbier in the south, right, Neil deGrasse? is this not like making sense to everybody? Okay, so, and it's closer in the north. So we have the analemma working out perfectly. I've showed you before the equation of time, how that all works perfectly. There is a literal change in velocity from acceleration to deceleration of the sun as the back of the sun, the rays hit the back of the sun as they pass through that Milky Way band area, in which it slows it down. And so the equation of time is resolved perfectly, and it does not work on a spinning Earth where they have to say that the equatorial orientation or axial tilt, as well as the elliptic orbit of this Earth around the sun, creates the apparent slowing down and speeding up the sun. It doesn't. Okay, it's right here. It's resolved. It's perfectly resolved. Understanding. What else we got here? We got the moon. Okay, lunar solar precession makes a lot more sense if that moon and that sun are in a container and there is pressure. Okay, there's pressure within this container. Now, as this moon and the sun move north and south within that tropic region, a little bit higher and lower for the moon, obviously, it's going to cause a pressure differential. So there's a little bit more slop over here. Now imagine like you have like a ball and socket joint, okay? Ball and socket joint, okay? Now let's say that ball and socket joint is a little bit loose around the equator. You're going to have a little bit of slop there, okay? Slop. We have slop at the equatorial region within the pressure zone here. Okay, we're talking about pressure, and there's a little slop, there's a little play. You know, it's like a ball bearing that's a little bit loose. That is what's causing the precession of the celestial sphere. When? Okay, the sun and the moon, they have more play here, and so the celestial sphere gets slightly. I mean, we're just talking very minutely. confused and it wobbles a little bit. Very, very slightly. Very, very slightly. Now keep in mind, I didn't animate the bulge at the southern region to show the pear shape, but we also talk about, they also talk about the poles are flattened. Okay, well obviously this would actually cause the poles to be flattened a little bit. I also mentioned before in a previous video a long time ago where I talked about the auroras, and I believe there's a metal rind to the Earth that has layers. That's another indication, a reason why possibly that's another reason why the poles are slightly flattened. Okay.
So, the most asked question by children would be, why is the sky blue? And it's a very good question, and it's a question in which adults give the wrong answer to the children. It's really sad too. Now, I admit that I had to think about that a little bit too. There's 3 factors that really made me consider why the sky was blue. One is because I thought that the glass sky is yellow in nature. If we look at pieces of Libyan desert glass, we see them as yellow, and I thought there was some kind of color inversion going on there. Maybe it has to do with, originally I was thinking of it must be like phosphorus or something in the atmosphere that it switched to color. I'm not a scientist, so I'm just kind of think, why would that change? Why would there be, there might be some kind of inversion, and or maybe it's some kind of polarizing effect, because we know that the sky is polarized and the glass does polarize the sky. However, there's some other options too. Obviously, the main reason people tell you, the main explanation is Rayleigh scattering, which they say the blue light is a shorter wavelength than the red light, and the blue gets scattered more than the red. But then the question arises, well, why isn't the sky violet then? Because violet has the shortest wavelength. And they will tell you that because our eyes don't pick up violet as well as blue. And that's, like this guy asks over here.
Because it's so short. If that's the case, why isn't the sky violet? Okay, here's the thing. The sky...
This guy's a shill. It's kind of pathetic too. Him and Vsauce. It's like they own the internet scientific community, and it's all bullshit. So he will go into, our eyes don't pick up violet as well as blue. Then I did some more research. And then I got to thinking about the electricity that's involved within the concave Earth, within this universe. It's an electric universe, okay? And the sun is the electrode, and the glass sky. See, this is the biggest problem with conventional science, is they will omit any reference to a glass sky, even though there's overwhelming evidence. And so glass, as you know, is an insulator. It's a dielectric insulator. And so I was doing some research on plasma cleaning. Let's go over here. And they have this this plasma cleaner. And what it does is it creates the glass is the dielectric barrier discharge. It creates a plasmic discharge. And so there's oxygen within this tube, within this glass tube, and it emits a blue light. Go over here. Show you over here. Plasma cleaning involves removal of impurities and contaminants of an energetic through the use of an energetic plasma or dielectric barrier discharge. Okay, so this glass is the dielectric, it's the barrier, and it's discharging the plasma, which happens to be filled with oxygen. Argon, oxygen, so these are all the same elements that we have in our atmosphere. We have oxygen, nitrogen, argon. It says in plasma, gas atoms are excited to higher energy states and also ionized. As the atoms and molecules relax to the normal, lower energy states, they release a photon of light. This results in the characteristic glow or light associated with plasma. Different gases give different colors. For example, oxygen plasma emits a light blue color. So it's right there. The explanation of why the sky is blue is because of the plasma, the oxygen in the atmosphere. and the fact that it's being emitted by the dielectric barrier discharge glass sky. So they have this little diagram here, okay? You have a high voltage electrode on one side, and then you have a ground electrode on the other side. So sandwiched between that is the dielectric barrier and the discharge. So in my graphic, the dielectric barrier would be the glass sky, and the discharge would be the oxygen emitting the plasma, as you see here. So we have the sun, high voltage electrode, the glass sky is the dielectric barrier, the oxygen plasma is the discharge, and then we have a ground electrode. So we have a beautiful capacitor going on here with the glass. The glass is creating the blue plasma. Now when it's red at the sunset or sunrise, I believe that the actual glass sky is is refracting the colors. Red, as I told you before in a previous video, red is the least refracted color, and so all the other colors get refracted away. So that's why we pick up the red. But the blue, I do believe it's because of the glass sky acting as a dielectric barrier that discharges the oxygen. You know, we have the ozone, right? The ozone layer, it's below the stratosphere. So that's why when we get up higher, the sky does not stay blue anymore. We're out of the oxygen zone. We're out of the ozone, okay? It's very simple, guys. Once you understand, we're living in the concave Earth, the concave stationary Earth. There's a glass sky that acts as a dielectric barrier, an insulator, which creates this plasma. It's very simple. That's why the sky is blue. Okay? See, what I did is, this is a piece of Libyan desert glass, and I was thinking, well, okay, if I hide that layer, this is the same blue color from the plasma cleaner I have here. And so if I overlaid that Libyan desert glass color with an additive light, so let's just go overlay, it really does not affect the blue that much. So that's why I negated the yellow glass, acting as some kind of color inversion to create the blue sky. So plus when we look along the horizon, we see the blue mist. I mean, if we look at like mountains like 5 miles away, we'll see they are being gelled through this blue, and that's the plasma. That's the plasma in the atmosphere, the oxygen. And that's due to the fact that we are underneath a glass sky that acts as a dielectric barrier, which discharges the plasma. So this is the real reason why the sky is blue.
Earth's center of gravity, up or down? Earth's center of gravity, why was it that at the turn of the century, the Geodetic Survey, Department of both the French and United States governments, made certain tests which upset the Copernican theory, then decided that they should be kept secret? What actually were these tests, and should they be repeated today under the most severe test conditions? I would think so. I think they really should be repeated today. Don't you think that? Sometime prior to 1901, the French government, wishing to determine more accurately the actual size of the Earth so that they could revise and refine the calculations regarding the distance to the Sun, hit on a way to measure the difference in distance apart at the top of two lines perpendicular to the surface of the Earth and the bottom of these same two lines. So they're just measuring the top versus the bottom of two lines, okay? They wanted a pair of lines long enough to give them an appreciable measurement. Obviously, they could not direct two parallel poles a mile high, but they did feel they could suspend two plumb bobs a mile deep into a mine shaft, and thus be able to measure the distance apart at the top and the distance apart at the bottom, which would be slightly less. Really? Are you sure about that? At the bottom. They wanted to know exactly how much less. The result of these tests were very strange. So strange that the French geodetic scientists contacted the scientists of the American Geodetic Survey and conveyed their results to them, with the request that similar tests be conducted in this country. Officially, nothing was done for some years, but in 1901, one of the geodetic surveyors happened to be working in the vicinity of Tamarack Mines near Calumet, Michigan. He contacted the chief engineer at Tamarack and informed him of the information transmitted by the French government
2 mine shafts were selected, and plumb lines exactly 4,250 feet long were suspended in each mine. At the end of these lines, a 60-pound bob was hung in order to prevent movement through a horizontal direction. Each bob was suspended in a tank of oil placed at the bottom of the mine shafts. In this way, it was reasoned magnetic forces could not affect them. The lines used to suspend the bobs were number 24 piano wires. For 24 hours, the lines were allowed to hang so that there would be no possibility of movement from putting them in place, still remaining in the lines. The measurements were begun. It was then that it was discovered that the French geodetic engineers had not made a mistake. Careful rechecking proved that the lines, contrary to expectations, were farther apart at the bottom than they were at the top. There can only be one implication to such a strange result. The center of gravity is not, as previously believed, at the center of the Earth. Well, it is at the center of the Earth if you invert your Earth. But in fact, it must be above the surface of the Earth, somewhere in space. If these 2 lines, formed by the suspended plumb lines, were to be extended upward, they would meet somewhere in the void away from the Earth. At that point, by all the rules of gravitational attraction, should be the center of gravity to this planet. It's not a planet. Greatly puzzled and not a little disturbed, the Tamarack engineers sent for Professor McNair of the Michigan College of Mines. With McNair there to check his results, the experiment was repeated, the measurements gone over again, and both men were convinced no error had been made. Professor McNair suggested that the plumb bobs be changed to a non-magnetic metal to overcome any possibility of magnetic attraction or repulsion due to a magnetic ore body nearby. But this was done. The same figures were arrived at. If magnetic influences had been at work, they would have varied with different metals, but they did not. Now, suggested McNair, it would be a good idea to prevent air currents from traveling up and down the mine shafts, which might be affecting the plumb lines. Thus, both mine shafts were sealed at the top. Once more, the figures remained the same. After trying many methods to vary the figures and failing, Professor McNair gave up in complete bewilderment. Professor McNair, when questioned, stated for publication that he had proved that magnetic attraction from the Earth or the sides of the shaft did not cause a strange divergence. Then he went back to the Michigan College of Mines and wiped the whole thing from his mind. Apparently, this is true, for he made no effort to contact his colleagues or scientists to call attention to the fact that what they were teaching about gravitation and plumb lines did not actually hold true when put to a conclusive field test. Maybe he was silenced? Is that a possibility? However, we can forgive Professor McNair for his reluctance to pursue the matter further because its implications are tremendous. Indeed, they are totally shattering to our concept of the universe, and in fact, if they can be made to hold true, make a shambles of all our physical sciences. Obviously, Professor McNair was unwilling to so upset his daily routine, or maybe he was paid off or bribed or silenced, nor were the United States and French governments. For as the French put it, the value of the franc will remain unchanged and bridges and buildings can still be built. So why make an issue of it? Professor Halleck of Columbia University was of a different mind. He heard of the experiment through a professor at the Michigan College. He held that this actually was attraction upon the plumb lines, and in a very astute article told how easily the matter could be settled by using phosphor bronze wires instead of piano wires and lead bobs instead of iron bobs. The Tamarack engineer, delighted to clear his mind of its confusion, followed these instructions to the letter and came up with precisely the same measurement as before. When Professor Halleck was informed of this result, he retired into a dignified and stony silence. Defeated. Not so the Tamarack engineer. He had decided that something was causing this phenomena, and he was going to find out what it was. Plumb bobs suspended in a single mine gave too delicate a difference in measurement, and after all, were not accurate enough to give any reliable figures on the amount of deviation. for instance per mile, and whether or not the deviation had any relation to the size of the Earth. After all, it had originally been the purpose of the French Geodetic Survey to refine the actual size of the Earth as then known, late 1800s, to a more accurate figure. They had something in mind concerning artillery and as well as astronomy. So this guy, Professor Halleck, determined to create 2 mine shafts. A second series of experiments were conducted at Calumet, Michigan. This time 2 elevator shafts into the mines were used instead of 1. Now this is important because Donald Simonek's refutation of the Timex mine shafts, he's claiming that the 2 separate mine shafts experiment was never conducted. And if it wasn't conducted, first I have to question his integrity as an empirical scientist as to why not to reconduct the experiment. But in lieu of that, or instead of that, or regardless of that, he's basing his deviation based upon a proposed centrifugal force created by a spinning Earth. And however, you can't account for that deviation with farther apart mine shafts. So his debunking totally falls through the window. These 2 were 4,250 feet apart and were also 4,250 feet deep. They were connected at the bottom by a perfectly straight transverse tunnel. Now, plumb bobs were hung in each shaft and measurements were made. This time it was found that the plumb lines were 8.22 inches farther apart at the bottom of the pit than at the top. It did not take the Tamarack engineer long to discover that this figure exactly represents the divergence that would be necessary to complete a 360-degree spherical circumference. In other words, a shell of force around the Earth. There was only one difficulty as expressed by the plumb lines. It would be the circumference of the inside of a sphere and not the outside. Further, the center of gravity as expressed by the angles formed by the plumb lines would be approximately 4,000 miles out into space. Obviously, this could not be true because if the Chinese were to make calculations based on a similar pair of mine shafts in their country, on the opposite side of the globe, the center of gravity would be found to be 4,000 miles in the other direction. The center of gravity, according to the plumb lines, was a sphere circumference some 16,000 miles in diameter. See, this is still under the faulty presupposition that the Earth is convex. Any place 4,000 miles up was the center of gravity. That's ridiculous. There's only one point of gravity. The center of gravity is still the center of the Earth. However, it's inside the Earth. 4,000 miles. Inside. We are in the Earth. Okay, can we blame the Tamarack engineer for going down in his mine and maintaining a grim silence from that moment on? A United States Geodetic Survey crew for 2 years conducted further experiments, among them measuring the surface of a long lake in Florida on the theory that water conforms to the true curvature of the Earth, of the Earth's surface. It's true regardless of how the land may be, thus giving a true level, only to find that water curved uphill. Water curved uphill in each direction rather than downhill. Now you may think if you look at a horizon, you see a boat in the distance and the boat is clipped at the bottom, and you think, oh, there, the Earth is convex, is spinning. No, actually that's not true. The water is rising due to an optical illusion caused by an inferior mirage.
Is anybody smart enough to figure out what's wrong with this picture?
A strange message on Mount Rubidoux. The words "Google Flat Earth" were found carved into the riverside hill in letters that were 10 feet long.
Anybody? Anybody figure that out? I wonder if the Vandals figured that out. I guess that's saying something for the mentality of the flat earthers.
You guys remember the Concorde? Good old Concorde. Supersonic Mach 2 speed jet. Twice the speed of sound. Well, if you've noticed the Concorde, you've seen it, and possibly you've even ridden in it, there's a significant, conspicuous tilt to the nose of the airplane. It's tilted up. Actually, it's constantly tilted up. And what determines whether it ascends or descends has to do with the actual tilt angle of the airplane. I was reading up here in Google Books here. It was talking about the Concorde. And according to this, it says the angle of attack indicator showing 3% of a tilt angle, a pitch angle. That means nose upward. When it's in a positive number, it means the nose is up. On final approach, it reads 14%. So, like, when it's landing, it's even tilting up more severely. So with a pitch attitude of 11%, the descent angle is 3%. So, obviously, when the plane is descending, it's at 3%. When it's finally landing, it tilts up even more. But if you need to lower the altitude of an airplane, you have to adjust the nose, the pitch angle of the nose. It's very simple. And then this is the dead giveaway here, this one right here. It says that the minimum pitch when supersonic is 5.5 degrees. When it's cruising at supersonic speed, okay, it's not ascending or descending, it's maintaining a constant altitude. They still have to incline the nose of the airplane 5.5 degrees. That's drastic. If you remember the previous video where a United Airlines pilot sat next to me, he admitted that in the Boeings, they pitch it up 2.5 degrees. However, with the Concorde, you're going twice that speed, if not more, probably even a little bit more than a regular Jumbo 747. You have to incline it 5.5 degrees to maintain altitude. This is a no-brainer, ladies and gentlemen. It's a no-brainer. The faster you go, obviously, you're going to have to pitch that angle higher because, you know, you're moving within the spherical cell of the Earth. It's concave. And they have to pitch that. They have to pitch it up 5.5 degrees. Minimum. A minimum pitch of 5.5 degrees. Okay. This is the silver bullet. This is the silver bullet. It's the aluminum bullet of the concave Earth. It's a no-brainer, ladies and gentlemen. It's a no-brainer. You're living inside the spherical concave cellular Earth. Thanks for watching.
The lengths that the powers that be will go to hide concave Earth information. I'll bring up this quote again. This was a threat that I received a while ago by somebody called Matt Jones, whose Facebook account does not exist anymore. It says, "My superiors have informed me I'm to give you a reasonable doubt. We will tell you this. Absolute evidence of concave Earth exists and is kept highly secret." It's kept highly secret. They've got a lot to lose, so they're protecting this. Okay, so we have this video. Remember Wolfie, my friend Wolfie, who uploaded a video yesterday, says, do aircraft pitch down to follow the curvature of the Earth? And so what he does is he attempts to disprove flat Earth with aviation, which is fine with me. Anybody can disprove flat Earth if you just use your common sense. But in this video, he has this telemetry display on his computer, and then he gives the analogy of a clock, how the hour hand on the clock is moving at such a slow pace, you're not going to be able to see it turn. And so he's saying, well, yeah, they do pitch down, but you're not going to be able to see it. You're not going to be able to detect it. Okay. And so he shows you here on his computer, well, yeah, we're going to be tilting down like that, but it's not going to be detectable. And okay, that's in direct violation of what I was told by an airplane pilot, a United airplane pilot that was sitting next to me during a flight. All right, well, before I get to that, let's just go to the comment section here. Spaceman, remember Spaceman? He says, do most planes flying at or below VNO fly at 3 to 5 degrees nose up? That's a good question, Spaceman. That's what Wolfie says too. That is a good question, Spaceman. There are 3 different angles we need to consider. Number 1, angle of attack, the wing. 2, deck angle, angle of the aircraft body. 3, angle of incidence, how the wing is attached to the body. The angle of attack on the wing is about 3 to 5 degrees in normal level flight. that is needed to produce lift. But that is not the deck angle, as the wings are attached to the body at 3 to 5 degrees upward angle already. This is called angle of incidence. The logic behind this is so that deck angle is level while the wings angle of attack is about 3 to 5 degrees. Alright, so he's saying that the deck angle is level. Remember that. This has many benefits. Better aerodynamics, less fuselage drag, more comfortable to walk around the cabin during cruise when it is level, better visibility for pilots, etc. The biggest reason is better aerodynamics. You know, Wolfie, you might as well work for NASA. Never a straight answer. Anyway, let's keep going on here. You can see the angle of incidence is very clearly. You can see the angle of incidence very clearly in this photo. The wing is angled, but the body is level. Okay, I'm not disputing you there, with Boeing's anyway, that the wing is not level with the cabin. But I am going to have to call you out on your bullshit here. Because, excuse me, according to this United pilot, it is the cabin, the fuselage, that is inclined to 2.5 degrees and not the wings. All right, let's play that.
Tilted upward, like we're going inside or hugging the inside surface of a sphere.
Well, this airplane flies at about 2.5 degrees nose up. It's level flight. So the nose
It's a nose up. Why is the nose up?
Well, they designed it that way because they make the wing fly level, but the fuselage has a tilt to it.
Okay, so that's a direct violation of what you just said, Wolfie. Mr. Pilot here says that the wings are level, but the fuselage is tilted up 2.5 degrees. Now, you're going to protect the secret, aren't you guys?
Do all planes have nose up?
Most Boeings do. I don't know about like the French and the Airbus, but the Boeings usually fly at 2 to 2.5 degrees. Nose above level horizon for level flight. That's the fuselage. You know,
Yeah, I see the Concords do that too, right?
Yeah, well, that's different.
Now, let's talk about the Concords. Now, I don't believe the pilot here gives you accurate information about the Concords. He's saying that the Concords, the faster you go, that nose is going to tilt down. But if you just look into the documentation of the Concorde, this was on a previous video I talked about here, it says that the minimum pitch when supersonic is 5.5 degrees.
You're going to have to pitch that angle higher because, you know, you're moving within the spherical cell of the Earth. It's concave.
Okay. The minimum pitch of Concorde, you're going fast, you're going at least almost 3 times as fast as a Boeing 747. And you're pitching that up 5.5, a minimum pitch of 5.5 degrees while cruising. Okay. You're running out of real estate. It's not angle of attack to generate lift. I mean, that might be partially true. But if you're in a container, which you are, and you're going very fast, you're going to be losing a lot of altitude if you go level, if the nose is level. That's very simple to understand here, Wolfie. Let's go back to your video, Wolf. Thus, they are not eliminating drag. Eliminating drag is exactly counterproductive for nosing up, especially at Mach 2 to 3 speeds with the Concorde and SR-71. Angle of attack falls apart when you simply realize the craft is running out of real estate, especially when going Mach 2 to 3 speeds. If you are consciously aware of concave Earth and attempting to hide it, shame on you. And Wolfie just goes on to ignore me and have this little circle-jerking conversation with Spaceman here. Okay, let's go back to this pilot testimony video. I'm going to go to the almost 9-minute mark.
You're almost looking kind of uphill.
Yeah, right.
Said you're almost looking uphill. He's talking about when you're in the back of the cabin. Let's go back a little bit here.
Actually sit in the very back, and you can look in the front of the airplane. You can see you're almost looking kind of uphill.
So he's saying when you're in the very back of the airplane and when you're looking toward the front, he said it's as if you're almost looking uphill. Okay, that's a direct violation of what you just said, Wolfie. Direct. You're hiding concave Earth reality, and shame on you.
Yeah, right.
Of course, and also you can take a cup. Anybody can have, liquid in your cup on the tray. 8 times out of 10, that tray is going to be level with the floor. Probably more than 8 times. Probably, maybe 95% of the time, that tray is going to be level with the floor. And when you watch the liquid at the bottom of the cup, looking down into the cup, you will see.
It simply adjusts.
You will see that the liquid will accumulate toward the bottom of the cup, indicating that the nose is tilting up. The fuselage, not the wings, Wolfie. Remember we had our little history with Wolfie here, where he brought up aviation maps, Jeppesen aviation maps, which indicate concavity to the Earth. Notice the latitude lines are all frowning. That's because a satellite, which is situated at the equator, is simply pointing down inside. And so it's generating these contour lines of the latitude lines. They're all frowning like that. And it's probably for legal reasons they have to show it like that, because that's the way it is. These satellites are hovering at these geostationary equilibrium points because there's a giant octahedral magnet in the center of the Earth. So yeah, you're busted, Wolfie. I'd like it if you actually, if you're a pilot, why don't you tell us your name, give us your credentials, instead of just being a shill. I mean, I appreciate you helping me bust flat Earth, but you're hiding concave Earth. Direct violations here. Direct violations. SR-71 is going to tilt 8 degrees nose up. You're going at Mach 3. The faster you go with a plane inside the Earth, you're going to have to tilt that up more. Now that would make no sense whatsoever if you're trying to eliminate drag. You would want to tilt it down. You would want to get it as level as possible, but you're simply running out of real estate. So they're hiding this information from you. It's the pact. It's the pilot pact. It's the AAPP, the Australian Aviation Pilot Pact, or the American Aviation Pilot Pact. Never a straight answer. Oh, is it the fuselage that's tilting up, or is it the wings that are tilting up? Is the Concorde nosing down the faster it goes, or is it tilting up the faster it goes? Documentation would show that it's tilting up the faster you go. Welcome to Cellular Reality. Thanks for watching.
Are you the pilot? Oh, okay. Yes. Am I allowed to say hi? Hey, I just want to say thanks for the smooth flight.
Right.
I have one question. Is there a specific angle of downward tilt you have to fly at?
3 degrees.
3 degrees for the curvature of the Earth?
Oh, for the Earth?
Because,
No, we just fly over the troposphere.
Really?
Yeah.
Do you have to keep kind of going down because?
No, we actually have to nose up. It flies.
What you doing?
It flies.
What you talking about? What you talking about, Willis?
Really? Because I was reading some stuff on the flat Earth that made a lot of sense. Have you looked into it?
Which one? Sorry?
I was reading a lot of stuff on the flat Earth.
Okay, yeah. True.
It's true?
Yeah. True.
It's true?
What you talking about?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
alright, cool.
All right.
God bless, brother.
Alright, have a good one.
You too.
I'm looking at you through the glass. Don't know how much time has passed. Oh God, it feels like forever. But no one ever tells you that forever feels like home. Sitting all alone inside your head.
You guys want some more proof that the moon is behind glass? I'll give you some. If you'll notice, if you listen to the scientism tarts, Neil deGrasse, or whoever, they'll tell you about the moon. They'll say it's an oblate spheroid. An oblate spheroid. It's flattened, slightly flattened. Interesting. Very, very interesting. forget what your eye may tell you about a perfect full moon hanging in the sky. Researchers say it's not a perfect circle, but in fact slightly flattened. And it even got bulges on its side. There's another one. Myth. Well, they give you the myths about the moon. Is the moon perfectly round? To the eye, the moon appears round, and it's natural to assume that it is actually spherical in shape, with every point on its surface equidistant from the center, like a big ball. Not so. The shape of the moon is that of an oblate spheroid, meaning it has the shape of a ball that is slightly flattened. Slightly flattened. Interesting. Okay. Let's check it out behind glass with refraction. Now, there's my moon, okay? I put these dark bands around the moon to help you understand, or give you a better understanding of the sphericity involved with the moon. The same thing with the sun. Okay? So I brought that through my modeler my layout version of Lightwave here, and so I toggle refraction, no refraction. You notice it's flatter with the refraction, don't you? Yeah, it is. Okay, what makes more sense? That the moon is not perfectly spherical, and like Neil says, it's an oblate spheroid that's slightly flattened, or we're looking at it through the glass, and the refractive index, the negative refractive index, flattens it. What makes more sense? Let's check something else out as well with the moon here. Let me go back to my screen. And in Illustrator, if you watched my previous video of the moon phases, I added an extra moon here that's right next to the darkness funnel, this moon right here. And how you see it's not perfect, like I have my termination line going right here. So this little wedge of the moon is not illuminated. And this turns out to be a 17-degree angle from here to here, 17 degrees. And so when we view a full moon, I mean, even the heliocentrist will say that, you know, you can't view a perfect full moon because of the, quote, shadow of the Earth, right? It's blocking. Otherwise, it would be a perfect full moon, but it's not. So if we let me go back here and okay. So I cut a 17-degree angle wedge. So it's this purple wedge here that you see. Okay. And so if you bring that into Lightwave, obviously you're going to get, is this without refraction? It's virtually the same thing. Yeah, this is without refraction. And so we'll bring it back with refraction and 400 millimeters. Yeah, so, and this is not going to be a hard edge, it's going to be feathered basically. And so if you look at some pictures of full moons, you'll see that full moon, you're going to get a slight shading to one side. You see how the craters are more defined? That's supposedly a full moon. Well, this is not a full moon, but you see where I'm getting. So there's going to be that slight shading. So that's the result. But more importantly was my first point, being that the reason why we observe the moon as slightly flattened is because we're looking at it through the glass. Look at that. Slightly flattened. Interesting.
Hi guys, this is just a casual little brush up
about concave Earth reality. I'm going to talk a little bit about the moon. If you watched Crow 777's video and about the moon, where he talks about, well, the moon doesn't seem naturally illuminated like a sphere, and normally it's a good reason to believe that it's, well, you might think it's not round, not spherical, but it is spherical. We do see the round shadow on the moon. The problem lies with your understanding of the shape of the Earth and how light works within the Earth. I say within the Earth because, as you know, I advocate a concave Earth, and since the moon in the concave Earth model is on the opposite side of the sun, which is on the opposite side of the celestial sphere, we see that the moon gets hit from both sides. See, it's illuminated from this side and from this side. When it's full, when it's opposite the sun like that, it's getting a double whammy illumination. And that is what is preventing us from understanding or seeing any sphericity, any graduated shadows of the moon. You understand what I'm saying there? Now, if it enters in this darkness funnel, it gets eclipsed. But north and south of that funnel, it will get hit from both sides. A full moon. That's why we don't see the shading of the moon. It only works in a concave Earth, guys. But we know, we can tell by the terminator of the moon that it is definitely round. The front side, anyway. If you watch my videos, you understand that the moon is only a half sphere, and it's part of, at one time, a full sphere when it was together with the sun. I believe the sun and the moon were at one time one hollow sphere, and they bifurcated, and now they are two half spheres where the sun gets the light. The sun gets the energy from the pyramid. The moon has to receive its light from the sun, and it's receiving it from the light from the sun, I believe, with this negative polarity that's going on, and that's why moonlight is much different than sunlight, but it's still being reflected from the sun. So that is why the moon does not appear to illuminate like a sphere. At least, see, I'm looking, this is a top-down view of a cutaway of the concave Earth. So here's the sun. The sun illuminates, and it hits the moon when it's full from both sides. So that's why we don't get the shading. Understand? Also, too, I want to talk about, the topic of radar came into, okay, well, radar astronomy supposedly predicts these huge, prodigious distances of planets, of asteroids, of the moon, of the sun. Well, no, that's not the case. Radar slows down when it goes through ice. And within this model, within reality, there is a glass sky at 100 kilometers high with ice attached to it. So the ice is going to slow down the radar considerably, and the radar scientists funded by the National Science Foundation are going to lie to you about the distances as well. And so anything they tell you is, for one, it's skewed by the ice and multiple concentric glass spheres that will also slow it down. And they will also lie to you about what's going on. But you're living in the concave Earth. And the moon is real. I mentioned this before, that sometimes, a flat earther might bring up that, well, sometimes we see a star that's passing over the dark side of the moon. That is because of the concentric glass spheres. They exhibit a cloaking effect at certain times where the moon passes over a value threshold, and that part of the moon will become invisible. So that is what's going on. The glass skies, they flatten out, they invert the celestial sphere. They flatten out your understanding and it compresses it, so you can view the planets, you can view the retrograde from any latitude of the Earth, and it will not appear to change in parallax versus what's behind it or its trajectory, because of the glass.
the refraction, the negative refraction of the glass. During a full moon, there's a question. It appears kind of got this flatness to it. I mean, it's not flat because we see the terminator line, and that's where a lot of flat earthers stumble. They try to say, oh yeah, the moon is flat, it's self-luminous. Well, no. There's a point I didn't bring up. I should have brought it before, but I just looked into it right now. It's called Lambertian reflectance. Or Lambertian reflectance is the property that defines an ideal matte or diffusely reflecting surface. The apparent brightness of a Lambertian surface is to an observer is the same regardless of the observer's angle of view. Now, this is what they're trying to tell you why it appears flat. And they're gonna compare it to a piece of paper. Like a piece of paper has a Lambertian surface, meaning there's not much specularity to it. There's not much. It's like an even isotropic reflectance. And so they're going to try to say that, well, yeah, even though the moon is spherical, you're not going to, if I were to make this into a sphere, I'm trying to tell you that you're still not going to be able to see gradation to the sides of it, which is untrue. That's not true. And the biggest problem they fail to realize that if you illuminate a spherical object, it will show gradation. It doesn't matter how Lambert the surface is, how diffuse the surface is, you're going to see gradation to it. Unless that object is being flooded by light that is not coming from one particular point, which is the case. And that's what I wanted to talk about. I'll share the screen here. Okay, what I did was, remember, I don't know if you watched that video where I displayed an image of a rendering I made in 3D of two glass spheres with caustics. There's a caustic anomaly in 3D. And what it will do, it will generate the caustic anomalies of the glass. And so basically, of the light hitting the glass. And basically, what's going to happen when a light source hits a glass surface, a curved surface like that, that's reflecting, it's going to converge, it's going to generate more interference as it converges around, and so it's going to create these little hot spots throughout the contour of the interior of the glass. And so this here, I have a celestial sphere which has no reflectance to it, and I have my sun at the top here, and I have one glass sphere inside of a larger glass sphere, and there's no light source on the bottom. The light that we're picking up on the bottom is just simply the light that's being reflected around and wrapped around there. And that's why we get the opposite side of the celestial sphere being illuminated. But if you look at this area here, obviously, this is where, in my model, in the correct model, this is where a full moon would happen. Now, this sphere is what I consider the moon sphere. So this sphere is a sun sphere, but still we're getting a lot of illumination here that is anti-solar. So this area here is being flooded with light. Understand? So it's not because the lunar surface is Lambertian. It's because it's being flooded with light. So if I overlaid that caustic image over my diagram here, if we had the moon here in the bottom, anywhere within this region, it's going to be flooded. It's not going to be coming from one individual single point source of light. You know what I mean? So that's why we get the flooding of the light, which causes it to appear flat. Like this moon right here in 3D. Okay, right now I have 4 lights that are flooding this moon, and it's causing it to appear flat. I talked about how before, on the sides of the moon, we're not getting the darkness, we're not getting the gradation, so it causes it to appear flat along with the refraction. There's a negative refractive glass entity covering the moon. For the most part, it's not because the moon is Lambertian that it's causing it to appear flat. Now, just think about that for a minute, okay? the sun, in a heliocentric model, the sun is hitting the moon, it doesn't matter. It's one light source. It's 1 point light source. So let me turn off 3 of these 4 lights that I have on the screen here. Okay, I'm just going to make them 0 intensity. 0, 0, 0. And then we're going to boost up the intensity of the single light source, which is directed exactly in front of it. Okay, that's what we would see in a heliocentric model if there was 1 point light source coming from the sun hitting the moon. You see the gradation all around the edges of the moon like that. But that's not what we see, is it? That's because the light is being flooded around the anti-solar region or illumination zone within the concavity of the Earth behind the glass. This has to do with glass spheres. This has to do with bending light. This has to do with the way in which the light emanates and hits the moon. So it's not because it's Lambertian heliocentrist. I talked about how the negative refraction actually inverts the apogee and the perigee. Understand that the moon is above, well, the moon is going to be above 2 glass spheres, one at 100 kilometers, one at the negative refractive glass sphere that's directly in front of it. And so, we pick up, any amateur astronomer or any honest astronomer, when they view the moon, craters of the moon, they're going to pick up chromatic aberration. That's a definite sign, a telltale indicator that you're seeing it behind glass. You're going to get distortion of the craters, like if you zoom into a crater really close, like a specific region of the moon, and throughout the course of the day, or even throughout the course of a few days, there's going to be a change and distortion of the actual surface. And that's because you're viewing it behind glass at different angles throughout the day or throughout each different day. There we go. So that is a more realistic depiction of how we're viewing the moon as it's being flooded within the illumination zone. And so it's killing the dimensionality of it, and it's creating a flat-like appearance. It doesn't mean the moon is flat, obviously.
Okay, the selenelion. I actually uploaded a video about this just recently, and then I realized that I had to correct the refraction. And so I'm going to show you that right now. The selenelion is a term in which they use to describe the phenomenon when the sun and the moon are above the horizon during a lunar eclipse. How can that be happening? They will tell you it's because of atmospheric refraction. However, within a standard conventional heliocentric model, there is not enough atmospheric refraction to compensate for the amount of lift of the sun and the moon, so we see them simultaneously above the horizon. So what is going on here? They actually avoid the answer to that. Actually, Mr. Rich from Mr. Thrive and Survive, I left a comment on his video where he tries to tell you what they're doing. He's right about what they're doing. They are not explaining the selenelion. They're avoiding the question and trying to replace it and distract you with their circus music. And so, but however, Mr. Rich fails because he doesn't understand that a lunar eclipse cannot possibly work. They can't, you can't have that working within a flat Earth theory. There is no object to eclipse the moon. There is a good reason to believe that it works within a concave Earth model. Actually, it's the only model that correctly describes a lunar eclipse because of the Gegenschein. If you watch my videos before about the Gegenschein, you will understand that how can, within a standard conventional heliocentric model, how can there be a anti-solar illumination point right where there should be darkness, right where there should be the Earth's shadow? So it doesn't work. So the only answer and explanation to the lunar eclipse is within the concave Earth model with bending light. And so Mr. Rich, he deletes my comments, so I screen capped this. I said, this is a previous illustration I made showing the propagation of light within the concave Earth. I showed you how the lunar phases happen. And so what I did was I simply showed you I show you how these glass skies, these concentric layers of glass sky, is actually refracting the light and causing the lift that is happening. So these red curved lines are the refraction lines, and the blue lines, the faded blue object there, that is giving you a reference of how it would be without refraction. It would be like a symmetrical display or array of light, like this right here. You see that the top half and the bottom half are perfectly horizontally symmetrical. Okay, now if I turn on the refraction, you will see that this bottom portion gets smaller than the top portion, like that. So we're getting this lift. That is why we see the sun before actual sunrise. Okay, and we actually have sunset before the sun goes down. That is why this is happening, because of the glass concentric layers in the sky that are lifting the sun and the moon. And so this is the only reason why the selenelion can work. It's within the concave Earth, within the glass skies, and the bending light and the refraction involved. And so if you go back, I'll show you the video I made about that a while ago, just holding up a glass bowl. You know, turn off the audio here. Let's get a bigger picture of that. And you will see how this happens. It's very simple to understand. See that? See the lift going on like that? It's not only lifting it, but it's squishing it as well. It's not only lifting it, the glass. That is why, that's the accurate reason, explanation why the sun gets lifted like that and squished, and the moon does as well. So the selenelion is finally accurately explained with the correct model of the universe, with the glass skies, with the concave Earth, with the bending light, and with the refraction involved. That's the only way you can get that significant amount of lift. So the observer's down here, and we're seeing the moon and the sun simultaneously, even though they are anti-solar. Okay, so see these top little half spheres? That would be if there was no refraction and they were perfectly anti-solar like that. But since we get the refraction from the concentric glass skies, it's going to lift it like that, and there's going to be an imbalance in symmetry horizontally from the bottom versus the top like that. So that's the same reason why from below the equator, say at 15, 20 degrees south latitude, you can see during, with a time-lapse photography, that you see the star trails, you can actually see Polaris spinning like that because of the glass skies. That's the main reason. So it's solved. So this is unprecedented. You've never heard the reason why the selenelion happens. It's all happening because light is bending within the concave Earth, and there are glass skies. Who can make straight that which God has made bent?
All right, another solved mystery which conventional bullshit science cannot explain to you accurately, because they don't understand that we're living inside the concave cellular Earth, and there is a glass sky above us. And there's probably a couple glass spheres within the Earth. Blood red moons. Blood red moons. Why do we see blood red moons? This is what they'll tell you. Bullshit, of course. They're going to tell you that the atmosphere alone, just the air in the atmosphere and the decreasing density of the atmosphere as you get up, or whatever they say here, is going to cause the redness that we see on a blood red lunar eclipse moon, which is bullshit. Let's see, what do they say here? There is circular ring around Earth, the ring of our atmosphere through which the sun rays pass. Sunlight is composed of a range of frequencies. As sunlight passes through our atmosphere, the green to violet portion of the light spectrum is essentially filtered out. The same effect, by the way, is what makes our sky blue during the day. Meanwhile, the reddish portion of the spectrum is least affected. Well, see, they don't simply understand. When you're looking through
light from this colored spectrum,
glass prisms, you're going to get the dividing up of the light into the colors. And which color, which end of the spectrum is going to be bent the least? That would be the red end. The red end, red is about 700 nanometers, 730 or 80 or something like that. It's not going to be as refracted as much as the other end. The violet end of the spectrum will be like 400 nanometers. So red is not going to be refracted as much as the other colors when light is shining through glass. Okay, that's all you have to know. So I go into Illustrator here, and I kind of revise my propagation of light in the Earth diagram, where I have the sunlight on the top, emanating around like that. We have this apple zone area of illumination, and it creates, on the other side, a convergence, the Gegenschein, the anti-solar illumination. I call it the darkness funnel, where it leaves a void, a funnel-shaped void area, which is circular when looked at it straight on. So we have this moon right here, all right? And it's passing through that area during the equinoxes when it's not above or below that funnel. It's going to be filtered out because look at the red. See, the red is bending the least out of all the colors. You get the whole spectrum here. So on the opposite end of the spectrum, the violet and the blues, they're going to bend a lot more than the reds. Or not a lot more, but significantly enough to where you're not going to see them. They're going to be knocked out. So we have our moon here, and we just simply rotate it around the center there, and that's how we get the redness. This is, ladies and gentlemen, this is like, you know, this stuff has been hidden for millennia because they didn't understand concave Earth, glass sky, visual optics that are created with glass. Look at that. We just solved why the moon turns red during a lunar eclipse. Okay? What we're looking at, obviously, is a moon in front of the sun with background stars. Now, if I go to my top view here, I'm going to show you what's going on. Okay? Concave Earth, glass skies. You'll notice this yellow glass sphere is surrounding the celestial sphere, the inner sphere there, and then we have the moon sphere, and then we have this the largest of the glass spheres, and they're all have indexes of refraction. At least one has a negative index of refraction. And you'll see this yellow glass sphere. Now imagine if my camera was, it is actually, it's down at the bottom. Let's put it up here. The camera's down there at the bottom, okay. And I got a little sun. That's right over here. There's my sun. It's behind the sun glass sphere, and then the moon is right in front of it. The moon is, or right below it. There's the moon, okay? So the camera's pointing straight at the sun-moon alignment. And what is going on? I was doing a little bit of fiddling around with eclipses in 3D, and what is happening is that because the sun is obviously, it's hot, it's going to generate heat, and it's going to create thermal expansion of the glass sphere that it's behind. And so it's going to create a bulging. And so let's get that bulging. Right now I have the bulge on the opposite side. You see at the top there's a little bulge. And so if I turn that around, rotate it, so it's directly in front of the sun. Now it's direct, the bulge is right in front of the sun over here. And now we can look through with our camera with the refraction turned on. There's a refraction. Now it's off. Now it's on. So we're always looking at the sun and the moon through glass with refraction. that bulge is actually going to displace the background stars, and that's exactly what they observed, Eddington and Einstein, is that the background stars were displaced as if looking through a glass. Wine glass, yeah, that's the ticket. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate that glass sphere so it's behind again, so we're not looking through the bulge, and you'll see the difference. I'm going to just toggle 180 degrees like that, and then I'll go back to 0. You see the displacement of the stars? That's all that's happening. Thermal expansion is happening because the sun is so hot. Now, obviously, if you've ever studied helioseismology, the study of the sun, they will say that the corona of the sun is like exponentially hotter than the photosphere. The photosphere would be the surface of the sun. And so, if you understand what really is going on here, it's the corona that is actually exhibiting most of the heat. Most of the heat is actually going sideways. So it's splaying out like that. And so that's why this glass sphere is not going to melt, because most of the heat is going sideways. If you ever look at a solar eclipse and you see the solar corona, I'll type one in really quick. And you notice how the corona, like this image right here, it shows how the corona is splaying out sideways for the most part. So most of the heat is actually going out sideways like that. But there is still heat in front of it as well. And so that is what's going on here. Also, I was doing some research on the Libyan desert glass, and it exhibits what they call negative viscosity. And when pressure is applied, when heat is applied, the index of refraction changes as well. And so it's going to displace the moon during an eclipse as well. And with the bending of the light, like I mentioned before in a previous video, the way in which the light of the sun hits the back of the moon is only a half of a sphere. Think of like a bowl. And it's paramagnetic, which means it has a very weak magnetic field, and it aligns with the magnetic field. And so this is a new moon over here. When, like the day after the new moon, the light from the sun is still gonna line up with the back of the moon. It's like the moon is like a concave catcher's mitt. It catches the light. That song by Sufjan Stevens, the bowl is filled with light. And so that's what's happening with the moon, and the way the light is interacting, the sunlight is interacting with the moon. The moon, it aligns up the light parallel, and it sucks it up when it's near the sun. But when it's further away, obviously it begins to deviate, and we begin to see the phases of the moon. But that has to do with the magnetism. If you ever watched that video where the guy is putting a magnet to a cathode ray tube, and the light beam or the electron beam from the CRT tube is bending, or it's being repelled by the magnet, well, this is similar to that, but only the moon, being a paramagnetic material, is actually aligning itself with the magnetic field. So we have a few different variables at play here. We have the negative viscosity, which also increases the negative refraction of the glass. It bends the light. It's called the relaxing of the Libyan desert glass. There's actually an article that NASA was a part of. Let's see if I can find that really quick here. I think it's right over here. Relaxation of Libyan desert glass, evidence for negative viscosity, pressure dependence, and silica. And look, lo and behold, it's in the Smithsonian Astrophysics, something or other,
associated with NASA. So yeah, they studied it. They know what's going on. They know that there's glass above, and it's creating real lensing. It's not gravitational lensing. So that's what's going on with that. And so lately, as I was continuing on, trying to map out the orbit of the moon, I realized that I was encountering a little bit of a difficulty with the illumination and the phases of the moon, especially when they were getting closer to the sun. And I would actually assume when they're getting when they're getting near full as well, when there's like a waxing gibbous moon. And that has to do with the fact that physically, if you were not to actually use a negative refracting element to actually decrease your crescent or your terminator line, you're going to run into problems. And so initially that's what I was doing. I was creating my crosshairs, and like for this location here, this phase, I was getting a 47-degree angle right there. And over here I was getting a 23.5-degree angle. And what I was noticing is that, let's go to the moon phase calendar here, December 30th would be a new moon. You barely see anything, or maybe it was the 29th or the 30th, but the first day after the new moon, you just get a little sliver. You just get a little fingernail there, basically. It's only 4% visibility. I'm like, oh, what's going on here? 9% visibility for the second day. And so it has to do with the negative refraction. I'm like, I was scratching my head for the longest time, and oh, of course, the negative refracting element is actually decreasing the crescent, and it's actually displacing the location of the moon. And so I have these little virtual moons up here. Like for this, let's go down here. For location B over here, I have a displaced virtual location over here with a refracting element, which actually cuts the crescent by half. It's 23.5 instead of 47. And same thing over here for the location over here. My angle is 23.5, and it decreases it by about half, 13 degrees. And so actually with that understanding at play, with the negative refraction at play, everything works out beautifully, perfectly. And so if I go into 3D here, let me see if you can see my, you see at the bottom there, you see my camera and my rotation angle here. I have a light source shining on the moon, and I will just toggle on and off refraction just like I've done before previously. Currently this phase, this crescent, does have refraction. The focal length is 250 millimeters, and the camera angle, this is important too, because this is going to help you understand when I talk about displacement of the image of the moon. It's at -6.9. That's the heading angle. So the heading angle is -6.9 with negative refraction on. The glass sky that's covering the moon is a negative refractive index of -1.5. And so that's the image that we get. And so now let's toggle off the refraction, and it disappears. That's for one thing. Let's increase the focal length to 2000 millimeters. What I have to do is I have to rotate my camera now. So that's the thing. I have to bring it back to almost 0. There it is right there. Okay, I'm at -0.8 degrees. So it displaces the actual image of the moon. Not only that, now look at the terminator. This is without refraction. Let's make it a little bit bigger. I got 2200 millimeters. I can take a screen grab of that and we'll compare and contrast. So copy. To -6.9 degrees. So we're talking about a 6-degree displacement. That's severe. I mean, that's just playing around. It could be more. I'm just helping you understand the negative refraction is critical in understanding lunar phases. Now you will understand. Okay, on the left we have negative refraction, and look at that crescent. It's half. The light source, the angle of the light source has not changed. Keep that in mind. If I go back here and to the top view here, I'll show you the light source. There's the light source right there, okay? I just angled the camera. That's all I did. See, if you look on the bottom here, I'm just angling the camera from, what did I say, negative 0.8 to negative 6.9. The light source is continuing to stay the same. And so when you angle the camera like that, obviously you're changing your viewpoint of the moon, and so you're going to see a different terminator line of the moon. You're going to see it's going to be thinner or thicker depending on which way you go. So that's just caused by the negative refraction and the displacement of the virtual image of the moon. Now you will understand, like, there's a lot of weird anomalies. People like, well, the moon, it seems to like rise really fast toward the horizon, and then it seems like it just kind of like lingers up in the sky for the longest time, and then it begins to accelerate back toward the horizon. Well, now you understand why, because there's negative refraction at play. It's amazing how I just continue to see how things are divinely scripted and orchestrated like this, and how God has hid these things from the wise and prudent, and the scientific mind is just completely baffled. I mean, it's just amazing.
Okay, plotting the moon within the concave Earth. This is a top-down view. We're looking at the celestial sphere in the center, the sun, and the moon. The celestial sphere has a pyramid in the middle, which is hidden by the dark waters and the thick clouds of the sky. The nebula is encased by a celestial crystalline sphere, which has the celestial ocean, which contains all the tiny sonoluminescent stars. You see the Milky Way band going across the top there. You have an extension of light going from the top of the pyramid to the back of the sun. The sun is only half sphere. It's flat in the back, it's dark in the back. And it emanates its light on a curve. The curve curves around and converges to the other side. That's why we get the darkness funnel. That's why we get lunar eclipses. And if the moon goes north or south of that funnel, it's just simply a full moon. The moon also is a half sphere or a bowl, and it orbits magnetically around the Earth. We see that yellow line is the glass sky at 100 kilometers high. And out of the three objects that are interplaying here, we have the celestial sphere, which is the fastest at 23 hours, 56 minutes, 4 seconds. Then, of course, we have the sun at 24 hours. That's the tropical year. And then the moon is the slowest of the three, and it goes 24 hours and 50 minutes every revolution, every day.
So as you see it moving around here, we have a little marker indicating our place on the Earth. Looks like we're in Africa somewhere. And once it accumulates to 27.32 days, that marks the sidereal month of the moon. That's how many days it takes for the moon to align back up with the celestial sphere. And if we go on to 29.53 days, that is what is called a synodic month. That is where we mark new moon to new moon, where the sun and the moon align up. Now I'm going to reverse the rotation of the moon by locking the sun in place so we can see the actual anomalistic month, where it records the perigee and the apogee. Perigee is when it's closest to the Earth and it's going to move faster, and apogee is further away from the Earth when it's going to move slower. So you'll see the variable speed of the moon. Remember, ellipses are fiction. Kepler was wrong. You see, the green line is a linear line. It's moving at a constant rate, and the moon is slowly beginning to slow down as the green line catches up as it enters apogee when it's further away from the Earth. So there's an influence that the moon has and the Earth has on the moon. When it moves further away from the Earth, it begins to slow down, and when it gets closer to the Earth, it begins to speed up again. You see the moon is approaching, getting faster. There's actually a 9-year cycle, actually it's 8.85 years of the anomalistic months. So every 117 months, the moon will do a complete circuit, almost like spirograph. There's a mechanism the ancient Greeks used. Archimedes actually probably made it. It was called the Antikythera device, and it actually predicted the eclipses and the motions of the planets. See, the Earth is a precise mechanism. This would never work in a heliocentric vast universe. So after 117 months, it finishes the complete circuit of the anomalistic cycle. Very cool.
Looking front on, we see the declination range of the moon and the sun as they pass across the sky. From left to right, we see the termination line of the moon changing from day to day. We also see the backside of the moon. This is the lunar month of January 20th to February 18th. We see the equator there is actually shared with the celestial sphere. That means there's no tilt to the Earth. We can also see the sun's ecliptic at negative 23.5 to 23.5, which means the sun is oscillating in a cylindrical path from year to year. This cycle for the moon is called the Draconic month at 27.21 days. And the lunar standstill of 18.6 years is the time in which the moon actually fluctuates in the sky, going from very high to a major lunar standstill at negative 28.5 to 28.5 to a lower minor lunar standstill of negative 18.5 to 18.5. This October, we are entering into a minor lunar standstill, so the moon will not ascend or descend that high in the sky. When the sun is low like that in the south, the bond it has with the top of the pyramid loosens, so it gets closer to the Earth. That's why we have a bigger angular diameter of the sun in the south. This is also how we can predict lunar and solar eclipses, because everything is synchronized within this time mechanism of the concave Earth. The simplest answer is always the best answer. Occam's razor.
Well, thanks for watching. I hope you found this fascinating. You can watch some of my previous videos where I talk about the motions of the planets within the concave Earth, how there's a real retrograde motion. It's not just an apparent retrograde, how they are affected magnetically by the sun and by temperature, how the inferior and superior conjunctions of Venus happen, how the horizon happens within the concave Earth. Light actually bends upward. It gives the illusion that you're living on a convex sphere, but it's actually a concave encasement in which you live in. Lots of stuff. You can watch my compilation video featured on my channel. And if you're new to the concept, I just want to say welcome to reality. You've been fed a lie your whole life. You've been indoctrinated, and now people are waking up more
than ever before. This is the time where the revolution happens, guys. So I'm not going to be making these videos forever on YouTube. So I need people, bold, courageous people, intelligent people like you guys out there, preaching this to the masses and standing up against the liars. One day soon, the hail will destroy the refuge of lies. So we don't have much time. So please help me make this a reality for people out there. I really would appreciate that. Thanks for your time. God bless. These visuals that I've been providing to you are helping you see the way the earth works as if light were straight. However, it's not straight, it's curved. Now, there's a verse in the Bible in Ecclesiastes 7:13 where it says, to consider the works of God, who can make straight that which God has made crooked, or curved. The Hebrew root word for crooked also means curved. So I think I've prophetically fulfilled that, or answered who can. So, take care.
Okay, this is a more polished version of the solar eclipses within LSC Earth. Previous video I made, I forgot to change the orbit of the moon because we're looking at the side view, so let's bring that up here. And we'll see the horizontal blue lines that indicates the moon's cylindrical orbit, and the horizontal dotted yellow lines indicates the sun's cylindrical orbit. And as I mentioned previously, I indicated these little shoot zones with these orange lines. So whatever latitude you are at, you're looking at the sun through this little scope zone. So if you're over here, let's say this is at like negative, I don't know, 8 degrees, or actually this is negative 23.5, I'm sorry, and the sun is directly in front of the moon is directly in front of the sun, we're going to get a shading right there. However, if the moon is a little bit lower in declination in this little illumination zone, it's going to carry the moon shadow at a more extreme latitude. So if you're standing on the South Pole in Antarctica, obviously, the moon would have to be lower in declination, which I have it over here. And so you're still, what I did was I expanded the orbital path of the moon. I made it closer to the Earth, and we have a little bit more elbow room here, basically, where the moon is traversing through that conical zone of illumination. And it just matters where you are situated latitudinally within the Earth in order for you to see that. So it's about trajectory, and it's about point of view and reference. And so that will help you understand better how we can see total solar eclipses happening wherever you are within the Earth. It just happens to be where you're situated and how that scope of view aligns up with the moon and the sun. And obviously the partial solar eclipses are going to be happening, as I mentioned before in my previous video, where the moon is going to be partially or just interfering with that edge of that illumination zone. Okay, so I have here in text, if the moon is higher in declination, the scope will align in the total eclipse to be visible in the tropic zone. So that I have that over here, and then this one over here. If the moon is lower in declination, the scope will align the total eclipse to be visible in the polar region. And so that would conversely go over here as well. If the moon was over here, we would get this total eclipse happening higher north, way up here. And of course it matters where the sun and the moon are situated in declination. Like right now I have the sun at minus 23.5 degrees, so this is at the winter solstice. So okay, so I brought that into 3D here, and so I morphed the moon shadows so you can better visualize what's going on here. As you see, as I scroll across the timeline, the shading is morphing, and the declination of the moon within that illumination zone is really critical as to where it's going to project the shadow on the Earth. If it's a little bit lower in that zone, it's going to project it like that. Let's say the sun, like I'm actually rotating the sun as well here, so this is like, maybe this is like, I don't know, negative 10 degrees or so. And if I scroll a little bit more, it's going to get more extreme like that. And that's how we're going to be able to pick up a shade zone in the very southern polar regions, or the northern. I just did the southern for this video. And of course, as I mentioned before, if that moon leaves that illumination zone, let's say the moon is right over there, it's not in the illumination conical zone anymore, so that moon shadow is going to wrap around. It's not going to hit the Earth, and it's going to curve around and converge to the other side, very similar how the sunlight converges to the other side and creates the Gegenschein at the anti-solar point. So there you go.
In Alliance, Nebraska, during the full solar eclipse. It's just about totally dark out. Here's what the sun looks like. It's pretty odd. Almost looks like there's two things up there. Two things going on. Really, really spectacular. We're in Alliance, Nebraska, one of the places that's supposed to be right in the path, and this is what it looks like.
So what exactly was that object that we saw in the sky during the solar eclipse on August 21st? Gee, was it Nibiru? Nibiru is part of I would say, a government PSYOP, second net operation to give the questionable people, skeptical people, a false alternative about what's really going on. And the fact that I've been telling you for over a decade that there is glass in the sky, we can actually see the projection of the eclipse on the glass itself.
Alright, it's coming back.
When the sun is not quite as illuminated like that, it's able to project itself, and we see a reflection of the sun and moon on the glass sky. So that's what's really going on, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay guys, this is a new and revised rendition of my planets, the orbit of the planets within the concave Earth. This actually makes perfect sense. It's functional. The retrograde motions are all working in fluid motion harmoniously with the magnetism of the sun. When the planet goes opposite the sun on the other side of the celestial sphere, it gets magnetically confused, it loses its magnetic influence from the sun, and goes the other way. It starts to sag, it starts to get lower to the Earth, so the angular diameter increases. It also increases its brightness. The magnitude is measured by the lower the number makes it a brighter object in the sky. So during the retrograde, the planets are going to become bigger. The angular diameter is going to get bigger, and they're also going to become brighter. when the planets are opposite the sun like that. That's how they get their retrograde motion, because they're losing that magnetic influence. This is a top-down view. It's orthogonal. It's not showing the tilt of the sun. I'm just doing a straight going around like that. It doesn't have the actual 23.4 degree tilt, which would make the planets look a little bit different too. So we have different planets here. I actually mapped out Mars. I plotted it out, so I show the different magnitude each day. See, each frame here is a day. It's not, you might think that, well, the sun is going the other way. No, that's because I kept the celestial sphere stationary. And so then that way I used that as a frame of reference to have all the other objects moving around it. So each frame constitutes one day. It's not 24 hours going on around like that. It's actually just one frame is one day. And so the sun appears to be going the other direction. But that's only because the celestial sphere is not moving. Now remember, before I said that the celestial sphere is 23 hours and 56 minutes and 4 seconds. And so the superior planets, which include Neptune, Uranus, Jupiter, and Saturn, they are going to be more in sync with the celestial sphere. They're not going to appear to move as much with using the celestial sphere as a reference. So Neptune would be the planet with the least amount of movement, that little blue dot there in the bottom. Then Uranus, that other blue dot on the bottom left. Then Saturn's up at the top right, and then Jupiter's on the left-hand side. So you see the loops. I included the paths. You see the retrograde paths. Each year, those planets are going to do a retrograde because of the sun. And then you have Venus. Venus is that green path. It's doing a retrograde there on the bottom right. For about 6 weeks out of the year, it's going to do a retrograde like that. Then you have that white line is Mercury. Mercury zips around, kind of like a fly around a horse. It just zips around the sun like that. It does a retrograde 3 times a year. So this whole cycle is actually taken as, I used Mars as a reference. So Mars actually goes around, it passes the sun about once every 2 years, a little bit more than that. So I actually plotted out Mars, a different magnitude and the diameter, and I show that when it goes into retrograde, Mars is that orange line. When it goes into retrograde like that, it's going to get bigger, and it's going to get brighter on the opposite side of the sun. And the glass sky is used, the refraction. See, this is also, I approximated the distance, so I couldn't really tell, but I just went by the angular diameter and I just approximated how far away I thought they would be going, with the inclusion of looking through them with a glass sky that actually exaggerates the size, the scale, if you get closer, if you get farther away, kind of like a wide-angle lens. So, but this works. I mean, the light from the top of the pyramid is hitting the back of the sun. As I told you before, I had a vision of the back of the sun. It was flat and dark. And so when the planets go behind the sun, they're not as bright. They're using the ambient light of the sun, but they're not as bright. Interesting too that when Venus goes in front of the sun, or Mercury goes in front of the sun, obviously they get the crescent. Those are the only 2 planets that get a full crescent. But when they do get the crescent, that crescent is very bright, as opposed to when it goes behind the sun and there's no crescent, but it's fully illuminated, but it's dim. You have to wonder, why is that happening? Well, it's because the back of the sun is dark. That's why it's happening. The moon, I'm not sure if it's a full sphere. It wraps around. I think the moon also performs a function of containing the planets magnetically so they don't fall down too far, like Mars or Venus. When they go into retrograde like that, the moon kind of like a gatekeeper. Hey, get back up there. Get back up again. So, but this is a working model. You understand just how, if you understand anything about fluid mechanics or magnetism or orbital angular momentum, everything is being affected. All these planets are being affected by the sun and the gravitation and the lack thereof. I don't think you can find a working functional model in a heliocentric universe of retrograde motions. They say it's just the apparent retrograde motion because the Earth is spinning, but I don't think you can find one. And if you do, it's really lame and horsey and campy. It doesn't make any sense. This is reality. This is the electric concave Earth universe. And it works. It works, guys. So this is revolutionary. I mean, pretty soon this is going to be the standard model. Just a matter of time. Because it makes sense. Earth is stationary. The celestial sphere is moving. The sun is moving. The moon is moving inside the Earth. However, we don't really have much time because I do believe the sun is going to stop pretty soon. And that will constitute the final day and the final hour. So, welcome to the new world. Welcome to reality. Ciao.
So, out of all these planets, Neptune would be the fastest planet, even though it looks like it's the most motionless here in this diagram because it's in sync with the celestial sphere. Remember, real true rotation is counterclockwise. Okay, so this false rotation is just to give you a reference frame and understand the paths of the retrograde. But normally, we're not going to see these, this is just one frame is one set time of each day. But normally they're moving counterclockwise. And so that's all the planets are doing. They're slowing down and speeding back up, being affected by the sun. This diagram will actually help you, this animation here, where we have the sun and we see the planets. So whatever's going to the left of the sun, it means that the sun is faster. So we see Mercury, it's going to the left. Normally it goes to the left, but then it gets whipped back in front of the sun. That's the only time that it's faster than the sun, when it goes into retrograde. Same thing with Venus. Venus is over here. Normally, for the most part, it's slower than the sun, but then it gets whipped back in front of the sun, but then it slows back down to its normal cruising velocity, which is slower than the sun. Now you see the other planets, they are constantly going faster than the sun. Like you can watch Neptune or Jupiter. Jupiter's going faster, see? Faster than the sun. Saturn, faster than the sun. All these interior planets, I call them interior, heliocentrists would call them exterior, are moving faster than the sun because they're more in sync with the celestial sphere. So the planet in which you think is the slowest, Neptune, or if Pluto exists, because it's more in sync with the rotation velocity of the celestial sphere, it's actually the fastest. And so Mercury is actually the slowest. And now the moon, I think the moon is going to be a little bit obviously slower than the sun. The moon goes at 24 hours and 50 minutes per revolution. But it's going to be faster than Venus and Mercury. I'm not sure if it's faster than Mars, but you get the understanding here. You have to think in terms of opposite velocity. So hopefully that helps.
If you look down from a spaceship on the Earth at night and look at San Francisco and New York, you must think that there is a tremendous amount of energy being produced in San Francisco and New York and all of these cities that glow. And of course, there's no energy being produced there. The energy is being produced in hydroelectric plants hundreds and hundreds of miles away, delivered invisibly to where that energy is being liberated. I maintain that's exactly what's happening with the sun. And I'll discuss just a few of those problems that I feel at least are fatal, absolutely fatal for the models that are so-called accepted these days. The problems, the ones at least that I'd like to talk about this afternoon, the big problem, the famous problem, is the missing neutrinos. And we'll talk about that in a second. The idea of this heat transport from the core to the surface, if indeed the heat is made in the core from the so-called fusion reaction, how is it transported to the core? Is it reasonable to say there's convection occurring there? The idea of convection, the granules that we see on the photosphere are supposedly the top of these convection columns. We'll discuss that. There are some oscillations in the sun's size and brightness, and of course oscillations in the solar wind, as somebody pointed out the other day. If there's a fusion reaction going on in the core, then how can does this reaction, does it have periodicities? That's never been discussed by nuclear physicists. There is actually a temperature minimum in the chromosphere. Where in the world does that come from? If the heat is all generated at the core, the temperature should get lower and lower and lower the further away you get from this thing. All of a sudden you find there's a minimum and then the temperature increases. Totally inexplicable in light of the present standard so-called model or models. The solar wind actually accelerates. It goes faster and faster and faster. How can you generate the stuff at a point and then spew it out and not have the stuff, whatever it is, the particles in the solar wind go slower and slower and slower? Why do they accelerate? And there's other problems as well.
Modern science isn't fruitful, it's dogmatic. It generates no new insights and it produces no new outcomes, no new ways of generating evidence. Science in Kuhn's image must be productive or its paradigm must change.
The academic obsession with a quote-unquote fuel for stars to quote-unquote burn is clearly an artifact of the energy barons' manipulation of academic theory with the funding, pure selection, and tenure processes under their influence or direct control. It profits them greatly for humans to blindly believe that in order to get energy to do our work, we must burn something, which they just so happen to own and sell at great cost financially and to our environment as well. Being that their current profits are astronomically higher than any time in recorded history, we immediately see how much they have to lose if mankind frees itself from their lies. Extending the burning concept from their dysfunctional machines to stars ensures them that mankind will continue to believe that there is no other way to get our energy in great quantities than by blowing up or burning their fuels. In the darkness of this false theory, mankind will believe that even the stars must burn fuel, and therefore this is the very foundation of energy production in nature. However, this is easily proven to be a lie.
Somehow or another, the sun is supposed to get the intense radiation from the center, from the core, out to the surface to give us the heat and light that we observe. And what we've found now is that one of the key links in that transfer of energy is missing. Of course, this prompts the question, what actually does transport the heat flux of the solar luminosity outwards? But a better question is, does sunshine come from within the sun?
Popular ideas about the sun have not fared well under the tests of a scientific theory. The formulators of the standard sun model worked with gravity, gas laws, and nuclear fusion, but closer observation of the sun has shown that electrical and magnetic properties dominate solar behavior. For centuries, the nature of the sun's radiance remained a mystery to astronomers. The sun is the only object in the solar system that produces its own visible light. All others reflect the light of the sun. What unique trait of the sun enables it to shine upon the other objects in the solar system? Today, astronomers assure us that the most fundamental question is answered. The sun is a thermonuclear furnace. The ball of gas is so large that astronomers envision pressures and densities within its core sufficient to generate temperatures of about 16 million K, producing a continuous, controlled nuclear reaction. Most astronomers and astrophysicists investigating the sun are so convinced of the fusion model that only the rarest among them will countenance challenges to the underlying idea. Standard textbooks and institutional research, complemented by a course of scientific and popular media, ratify the fusion model of the sun year after year by ignoring evidence to the contrary. It seems that the sun does not even quote-unquote respect gravity, the mass of charged particles expelled by the sun as the solar wind continues to accelerate beyond Mercury, Venus, and Earth. Solar prominences and coronal mass ejections do not obey gravity either, nor does sunspot migration, nor does the movement of the atmosphere, since the upper layers rotate faster than the lower, reversing the situation predicted by theory, while the equatorial atmosphere completes its rotation more rapidly than the atmosphere at higher latitudes, another reversal of predicted motion. If the sun's atmosphere were subject only to gravity and the hot surface, it should be only a few thousand kilometers thick instead of the 100,000 kilometers or more that we measure. Even the shape of the sun defies the expectations of theory. The revolving sun should be an oblate sphere, but it is a virtually perfect sphere, as if gravity and inertia have been overruled by something else. David Talbot. The nuclear furnace myth of the sun was created to support energy-baron profits and control. This in turn invalidates all tokamak fusion reactors based on the idiotic theory that the sun is a nuke furnace, meaning that $48 billion and more of taxpayer money has been wasted on this fraud called nuclear fusion. This is how the racket is run. The powers that be fund all this worthless quackademic science in order to keep you paying for energy, which should be practically free in all its applications. Their slave system of backwards explosion-based technologies ensures them that we keep paying for their fuels, fighting their dirty lying wars, and enriching the subhuman filth who profit from these demonic world-destroying activities.
There's no inside structure.
Is it hollow?
Yeah, there's only a surface. There's nothing inside.
Is the sun actually, do you believe, combusting in on
It's
itself?
not burning anything. There's no fusion in the sun. That's well understood.
Proven.
Yeah, well, there's just not the way to prove that there is any. It's only in the flares that you get fusion. That's why all the X-rays. The flares, the arcs, and the X-rays, and the microwaves, and whatever result of fusion in the arcs. There's no fusion in the sun. They don't know how the sun works.
Why do you, what's special, how does the sun make light?
It's a transformer. Transforms from some other dimension. It's not burning anything. It doesn't have to. It's a converter.
Of what?
I don't know. Nobody knows. But that's what it does. That's the only thing it can do, because that's how everything works.
How fast do CMAs go? Well, they will tell you they go up to 1 million miles per hour. Why do they say that? Well, look at this animation of the sun here, okay? This animation is going every 10 minutes per frame. Look at the bottom here. It says every 10 minutes you have a frame. So look at the speed of these CMEs exiting the sun. Look how slow they're going. And that's accelerated. Okay? They're going very, very slow. Very slow. I'm talking snail slow here. And yet they say, why do they say they're going so fast? Think about that. Why does conventional astronomy say that CMEs are going up to 1 million miles per hour? Here, average of 489 kilometers per second, which equals about over 1 million miles per hour. Why? Well, it takes 1 to 5 days to reach Earth, right? So they just assume that the sun is 93 million miles away, so they just calculate that, oh, the CMEs have to accelerate, even though they look like they're going very slow. And that's the only proof of we see of their speed is at the surface of the sun. Oh, it takes 3 days to get to Earth. Okay, there, yeah. So it's got to be accelerating. Like this guy, Donald Scott guy. Listen to this.
The corona, the particles, the positive ions that make up the solar wind increase in velocity. They accelerate.
No, they don't.
Nothing in the standard model that predicts that. Nothing.
The standard model also says the sun is 93 million miles away. It's not.
Here's a picture of how it happens. It isn't just a mild acceleration, it's a whooper of an acceleration.
Fucking cuckoo. You're cuckoo.
The velocity at the surface of the sun are quite low.
Yeah, quite low. That's all you fucking have. You know, these people are so fucking hypocritical. Just like the fucking evolutionists. Oh yeah, we're going to assume the sun is 93 million miles away, even though we only see the speed of the CMEs and the solar wind going very slow at the surface of the sun. So we're going to assume it has to accelerate. No, the sun is very fucking close to the Earth. It's only a couple thousand miles. It's inside the concave spherical Earth. The sun is small. The sun, look at you fucking clowns. You think the sun is fucking huge? You think it's fucking 800 and fucking some odd thousand miles wide? You're fucking crazy. Look how small that looks, man. This is like what? At most 20 miles wide. Fucking clowns. Stupid ass clowns. There's no evidence, there's no proof whatsoever that a CME is going 1 million miles. It's the exact opposite. It's going snail's pace. CMEs go very slow. If the sun is, let's say, 2,000 miles away from the Earth, and it takes 3 days to get to Earth, what does that equal? Come on, do your math. You tell me.
50 miles an hour at most. Unbelievable. Probably even less. Fucking clowns. Judgment's coming, people. Judgment's coming. The sun is a half sphere. I've seen this, like I said before, in a vision when I was up in heaven above the celestial sphere, above the celestial ocean. It has a backside, and it's dark and flat from the backside. We have light hitting the back midsection of the sun. I do not call it an equator because it's not a ball. It's not a gaseous ball. And it has a top and a bottom. And there's a difference in velocity. It's not a difference in rotation because we simply have a conveyor belt action going on with these contour lines. And so this difference in velocity is actually creating the twisting, the arcing that we see in the sun. The reason why it's faster across the midsection is because of the collimated light rays that are hitting the back midsection of the sun. So we can never see the backside of the sun from Earth's vantage point. We always see the front side. Same thing with the moon. We only see the front of the moon and the front of the sun. I believe the sun and moon were at one time one ball, where they bifurcated, they split up and became two. The sun received the light, its energy from the pyramid, from the power source. The anode to the cathode, the father to the sun. And the moon receives the sunlight. I don't believe the moon is a self-illuminating sphere. We see shadows on the moon. We see shadows on the moon craters. So that is what's happening with the sun. It's a masterful deception. Completely fooled all of scientific humanity. They think the sun is a gaseous ball, but it's not. The sun is electric. When you see sunspots, they are actually holes. They are indicative that the sun is hollow in this area here between the back plate and the front surface. So the conveyor belt action is going to wrap around the convex side, and it's wrapping around and going behind on the concave side of the sun. It's a difference in velocity. And the reason why the midsection is faster is because the energy from the collimated light in the back is going across the midsection, energizing that section more. It's also why we have rainbows. We can tell. The reason why we see rainbows is because we see the rim of the sun. Just like if you hold a flashlight to a wall, the glass bulb in the flashlight disperses the light. Same thing with the glass in the sky in the concave Earth. The glass in the sky disperses the sunlight and projects it onto water vapor, reflective water vapor, whether it's from a garden hose or whether it's mist from after a rainstorm, or whether it's dew on the ground, or whether it's clouds when you see the rainbow from an airplane. You see the top of clouds, you see a rainbow, you see the shadow of the airplane and the rainbow. So that is what's going on. It's a masterful trick. It's a divine trick. It tripped up all of scientific mankind. The sun is electric. It's a transformer. It receives its energy from the central pyramid, father to son, anode to cathode. Thanks for watching. So you tell me,
How do you know there's an octahedron in the middle of the concave Earth, Steve? How do you know? Well, like I told you before, I read the Bible, Job chapter 38, verses 4 through 7, laid it with measures, stretched a line upon it, the cornerstone was placed. I read Revelation 21, describes the city as wide as it is long, as it is high. It's 12,000 furlongs. And then I found out that there's magnetic equilibrium points within the ocean along the equator at 90 degrees apart. And then we have a little corroboration from our good old buddies at Not a Straight Answer. You see, I was doing some studying up on the meteoroids that hit the glass sky at 100 kilometers. And this lady was giving a presentation, and she mentioned this little gem that just kind of piqued my interest. She said, the sources of these sporadic meteoroids are coming from the north apex and the south apex. They're also coming from the helion and the antihelion. When you think of pyramid and the word apex, an apex is the top of the pyramid, right? But if it's a north apex and a south apex, you're talking about a double pyramid, an octahedron, right? It's crazy, guys. Now it's right there in plain sight. Let me show you. It's right there for you all to see. Let me get myself out of the way here. This is from Sporadic Meteor website. Sporadic meteors don't come from completely random directions, which their name implies. Most sporadic meteors come from 6 sporadic sources. Look at this. Look at this imagery. Look at this imagery, people. We have the celestial sphere in the middle of the Earth. We have the north apex side of the pyramid. We have the south apex side. I also mentioned to you before that the northern side was brighter than the southern side. Okay, now of course they're going to twist things. They're going to try to fit this within a heliocentric model. They're going to say, well, the apex meteor, the apex is in the direction of Earth's motion, so apex meteors collide head-on with Earth. The helion and antihelion, these are the helion and antihelion sources. Now this is also interesting too, because I mentioned before, on one side we have the sun, and then we have the anti-solar point, the Gegenschein. It's right there in plain sight, people. So, and then they also talk about a toroidal origin too. Let me see if I can get that one to you really quick here. There it is. Toroidal origin of meteors. Look at this, guys. So we have the helion and the antihelion coming from the sun, and then we also have the Gegenschein, where the sunlight converges on the opposite side, just like I told you before in the concave Earth. Then we have the north and south apex. We have a octahedron in the middle of the concave Earth, in the middle of heaven, behind the celestial sphere. And the north and south toroidal origin actually traces the perfect outline of the celestial sphere. Even this asteroidal one does as well. It's right there in plain sight, ladies and gentlemen. This is the nail in the coffin for the concave Earth. No doubt about it. Oops, wrong image. No doubt about it, guys. No doubt about it whatsoever. This is what's going on, guys. It's right there. It's right there. Amazing. Amazing.
You guys want more revelation? I'll give you something. It has to do with the continent formations and how they're formed and why they're formed the way they are. I mean, if they're on a spinning ball, obviously that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. You probably get like this, whiplash effect. If they were on a flat plane, you wouldn't. Why are they formed the way they are? But if you understand what I've been telling you, that there's an octahedron in the middle of the Earth and it's concave, the Earth that is, you can understand why they're formed the way they are. Here I pulled it. Well, let's watch this video first. We have, thanks to NORAD or somebody, within the military, we have the coordinates for the equatorial equilibrium points, the longitude. 2 stable ones, 2 unstable ones. That, I believe, has to do with the fact that the stable ones are in the surface, the sea levels, or the ocean floor is not as deep as the unstable ones. But what I did was simply just enlarged the octahedron so it intersected the Earth. And you can just check it out from the top, looking down from the north. Look at that, how South America fits perfectly in the upper right quadrant. Look how Africa fits perfectly in the bottom right quadrant. Look how Australia fits almost perfectly. Yeah, I would say pretty much. In the bottom left quadrant. And then look at this. The Pacific Ocean, the Ring of Fire, fits perfectly in the top left quadrant. That's looking from the top view. Northern hemisphere, we have more land, and that is because the northern side of the octahedron is emanating more energy, more light. So the southern hemisphere really is a telltale sign showing why that is happening. Look at that. Look at the tip of South America. It's mimicking the shape, the triangular shape of the bottom side of the octahedron, the H side. Look, same thing with Africa on the G side. Is that the G side? Yeah. Bottom, it's fitting it perfectly. Australia, how's that looking? It's kind of just like situated in the middle of the F side. Isn't it wild? This is confirmation. The Earth does not spin, and the continents are mimicking the pattern of the triangular pattern of the sides of the octahedron. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. That's what's going on. More proof. Interesting. Very, very interesting. So there you go. You want more proof that you're living inside a concave sphere? Well, here you go, with an octahedron in the center, and why the land formations form the way they do. We have a magnetic octahedron emanating magnetism and isolating the continents into their quadrants. Proof positive. Something we can pick up with radar. Seymour radar picks it up. It's right there, guys. Undeniable proof. Get with the program, guys. You're living inside the concave LSE Earth. Now look what we have here. You see the north apex of the octahedron pretty much stays visible throughout the whole year. However, the south one only becomes visible during part of the year, i.e. when the sun goes south in the wintertime. And so we're getting a preference of warmth or activity more in the northern side, on the northern side. So this is really why the northern hemisphere is warmer than the southern hemisphere, because it not only has the sun, which is orbiting cylindrically around the celestial sphere yearly, but it also has the north side of the octahedron. The Bible calls it the sides of the north in the book of Isaiah 14 and Psalm 48, I believe. So the sides of the north, the top of the north apex side of the octahedron stays lit or stays warm throughout the entire year. And that's also why I believe we're seeing these hotspots here at the top, because I believe that the north side is emanating this magnetism, this heat, this light. The Father of Lights is behind the celestial sphere at the top, the sides of the north. And that is why the northern hemisphere has more land, it's warmer, and I believe also in order to compensate
to kind of just even out a little bit, what God originally did was he allowed the sun to get closer to the Earth in the southern hemisphere, to this part where we see the analemma, and the sun is getting closer in the southern hemisphere in order to kind of counterbalance the heat so it doesn't get too cold, too frigid. Fast forward to my animation there, you see the sun is closer to the Earth in the south and further away from the Earth, because the Earth already has the warmth of the northern side of the octahedron pretty much throughout the whole year. So that's why we have we can see that the sun is actually a little bit bigger in the sky with its angular diameter like that. So look at that. Summer, winter, summer, winter, summer, winter. Now, the reason I believe that we're seeing more concentrated areas at the equator, well, for one, that's where we have the magnetic equilibrium happening, but also, too, because of the way when you view the celestial sphere, perspective-wise, if you just take like a ring of equidistant points around the equator, when you look straight on like that, you're gonna see more behind each other on the sides, so you're gonna get more activity on the right and left. So that's why I believe that is happening. So yeah, there you go. Thank you, Seymour, for inadvertently showing us the celestial sphere, the octahedron in the middle of the concave Earth, and they totally misapply it to sporadic meteoroids, which is not what is happening here. They're actually showing the activity in heaven, right in the middle of the Earth. That's pretty wild stuff there. So yeah, concave Earth reality. It's the only option to the shape of the Earth. Everything works. The octahedral part of the crystal field theory tells us that an octahedron is formed from the three cardinal axes. So we have the third dimension here. An octahedral is a product of the third dimension. And what we have is the X, Y, and Z axes, Z being vertical like that. They talk about having 6 negatively charged ligands, they call them. And so these ligands are on the corners of the octahedron like that. In the center is a positively charged atom that they call a cation. And what they tell you is that the ligands, they converge toward the positively charged cation, and then they merge, and it creates a sphere, a spherical energy bubble. Joe Parr mentioned a spherical energy bubble before. And so with that understanding, you can understand the foundations of the Earth, as recorded in Job chapter 38, like I've mentioned before in previous videos. And you could also understand the origin of heaven, the origin of life. It's right there. So I'll play that for you. And now we understand why we have a spherical Earth. We have a spherical celestial sphere. We have a spherical glass bubble in the sky. Actually, probably a couple of those. And it all has to do with the understanding of crystal field theory and product of the spherical energy bubble that is created by the convergence of the negatively charged ligands converging in the center. Also note is that the Libyan desert glass is a quartz crystal, so that's a really good indication that the glass up in the sky that fell down in the Libyan desert is part of the glass sky, part of the glass bubble, the glass sphere in the sky being a product of the octahedron. Play a little bit of this video here on YouTube where it explains it a little bit.
But when they all come together around a metal cation, they effectively form a spherical field around the metal.
So there you go. They form a spherical field around the metal, around the central cation. So that's a really good indication that The spheres are formulated from the octahedron, the foundations of the Earth, as I mentioned before. Once you have your foundations of the Earth correctly understood, everything else is built upon it properly. And then you understand you're living inside the cellular concave Earth. A little bit more here. And then within crystal field theory, there are actually orbitals where the electrons supposedly flow. And so they have 5 different orbitals here. We have the dz squared or z squared orbital going along the vertical z-axis. This one is actually distinct from the other 4 orbitals because it actually has a toroidal shape that's aligned with the x and y axis, and that's really interesting. I'll get into that later after I describe the other orbitals here. Then we have the dx squared minus y squared orbital, which is aligned with the x and y axes as well, but going right along them like that instead of toroidal like the dz squared orbital. Those are the 2 main orbitals. The 3 inferior orbitals, I'll get to those, I'll show you those. This is the dxy orbital, but these orbitals are not aligned with the ligands, so they're going halfway between the ligands. And then you have the dxz orbital, and finally the dyx orbital, like that. But going back to the initial orbital, that actually is distinct from all the other orbitals because it has a toroidal shape in the center there. And now you can understand why we have an equator, why there's activity at the equator, that the northern hemisphere versus the southern hemisphere, there's like a reversal. There's a reversal of hurricane movement. There's a magnetic equilibrium that we can feel with Foucault's pendulum, for instance. The pendulum will not spin at the equator. And so with this understanding, that's why we have an equator in the first place, like that. And so this field that emanates out, it creates an equatorial equilibrium. That's why satellites can actually levitate at these cardinal corners of the base of the x and y's. And that's why we have the doldrums within the Earth. It all has to do with the understanding of crystal field theory, octahedral crystal field theory generating in equatorial region with the dz squared orbital. So that's understood. Everything is finally understood. Okay, the foundations of the Earth have been found. And you're living in the concave cellular Earth.
2 halves of 1 sphere. Initially, somehow, I believe, with crystal field theory, if you watch my video about that, we have octahedral crystal field theory. We have the ligands converging in the center, and they create a spherical energy bubble. And so we have a north side and a south side. And so somehow they bifurcated. The sun and the moon, sun on top, moon on the bottom. They split, and they possibly shot up out to the north. Maybe they shot up both. Maybe they both shot up. Hold on. I'm not even showing my hand here. Maybe they both shot up the north apex, but if you watch, what's that guy's name? David LaPointe. He's got videos about the primer fields, and it actually is. There's good reason to believe that the sun and the moon are bowls. Okay, now he's got the bowls opposite each other, and it's creating this plasma energy of light here, but there's holes in the center of these bowls, and it creates this magnetism that shoots out projectiles, basically. So that's probably how the sun and the moon formed, initially in the center of the Earth. If you understand crystal field theory, look into primer fields as well. Hi, speaking with the water god, the water of life. Yeah, I'm doing some research on cavitation and sonochemistry and sonoluminescence. Really interesting stuff. Because with this sonochemistry research, they're talking about how the chemical processes accelerate 1 million times faster. And so this blows the whole theory of evolution out the water. Life could have been created really quickly. Within 6 literal days. It's good shit. Cavitation, sonochemistry. Check it out. Cavitation is the bubbles in the water, when sound enters water, violently. It'll cause billions and billions of these tiny little bubbles that'll expand and collapse in themselves and create this toroidal shape, like the bubble. An inverted bubble creates a toroid, and it creates this high, extremely fast jet, and it bombards things. It can actually penetrate metal and shit like that, so it's very strong. But this sonochemical process accelerates chemical reactions. Accelerates hundreds and thousands of times as fast as what you would think. So, let there be light, let there be a firmament, let there be seas, let there be earth, let there be the sun, things happen, bam, on the 5th day, bam, plants on the 6th day, bam, animals. Sonochemistry, sonoluminescence, it all happens within the container, the glass container of the firmament. Celestial sky, which has the celestial ocean. Silly people. Even during the flood, when the waters fell, more cavitation happened. More increased variation of species happened too after the flood.
In the circle of Earth, in the circuit of Earth, in the compass of Earth, in the circle of heaven, in the circuit of heaven, in the compass of heaven.
Circle of the Earth, Isaiah 40:22. Circuit of heaven, Job 22:14. Compass upon the face of the deep, Proverbs 8:27. In all three of these cases, the Hebrew word hug is used to denote either a circle, a circuit, or a compass, which means they can be interchangeable. They mean the same thing. But the most controversial case of the three within the Earth-shaped debate community is the denotation of the phrase sitteth upon the circle of the earth in Isaiah 40:22. Many Bible-believing flat earthers use this verse as an almost standalone confirmation bias that the earth is flat and circular. But a little investigation to the origin of the word, as well as applying a little common sense, will reveal something not so commonly known or accepted about the correct shape of the earth. The root word hug occurs once as a verb in the Hebrew Bible in Job 26:10. He hath compassed the waters with bounds until the day and night come to an end.
and in addition to the 3 verses mentioned initially, another verse used it as a noun in Isaiah 44:13 to describe a circle instrument or a compass. The carpenter stretches out his rule. He marks it out with a line. He fits it with planes, and he marks it out with a compass. Hence we have an instrument to render out a circle. But the critical element that is omitted from the translation is that the originator who scores out the circle is inside it, not upon it or over it. Even in the Greek Paleo-Hebrew Septuagint text, the word for circle is called yapav, which was used in Isaiah 40:22 and is defined as a rim or a ring or a perimeter that encompasses something that is inside. In other words, that which encases or surrounds something else. In almost every case in the Hebrew text where the word sit or sitteth is used, the preposition in is used as opposed to on or upon. Hence, the translators of Isaiah 40:22 incorrectly inserted the word upon instead of the more appropriate word in. From the translators' oblivious understanding of the concave sphere of the earth that surrounds us, they inserted upon instead of in, carrying the illogic line of thought that God could not possibly be in the earth, he must be above it or on it, looking down, especially since the verse continues on to compare the inhabitants of the earth to grasshoppers, but dwelling at a great height above the ground, so much so to perceive the people as small grasshoppers, and still being in the earth is perfectly resolved when understanding God in times past and heaven are in the middle of the earth, and the direction of up is always at the center. Hence God sat in the circle of the earth. They should have written, "It is he that sitteth in the circle of the earth," or "It is he that sitteth in the circuit of the earth," or "It is he that sitteth in the compass of the earth." The only logical conclusion is a hollow concave sphere where God resided in the center, which is heaven. Hence God was in the circle of heaven just as he was in the circle of earth. Now it can be said that God as a man walks upon the face of the circle of the earth, or the face of the circuit, or the face of the compass of the earth, still being contained by the circle, circuit, compass of earth, but not contained by the circle, circuit, compass of heaven. Heaven being inside earth is also confirmed in Job 38:33 as well. Knowest thou the ordinances of heaven? Canst thou set the dominion thereof in the earth? Isaiah 40:22 goes on to say, God stretcheth out the heavens as a curtain, and spreadeth them out as a tent to dwell in. Since we know that God compared heaven to a womb in Job 38:8 and Job 38:29, which is a spherical container, we also must apply that knowledge to the circuit of heaven mentioned in Job 22:14. Now that we understand that heaven is a spherical container, we can understand its darkened shell acts as a curtain that conceals light. The darkened celestial sphere is the cloaking object that blocks heaven's light from the earth. Dark waters and thick clouds are mentioned in Psalm 18 in relation to heaven. In Psalm 104 verse 2 it is stated, Who coverest thyself with light as with a garment, who stretcheth out the heavens like a curtain. But logic will easily see where it would make much more sense if it read like this. Who coverest thy light as with a garment, who stretched out the heavens like a curtain. Comparing heaven as a tent to dwell in makes a lot more sense if one realizes there's a double pyramid in the middle of heaven, in the middle of earth. Tents are shaped like pyramids. Now I trust, my friend, that you have become illuminated and the whole issue about circle of the earth is perfectly resolved within the LSC concave earth. Have a great day.